Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am one of your hosts for today, John DeLynn. It is July 11th, 2023, and today we are so excited to have in the house the Stacey Harkey. Hey, Stacey.
Hey, how's it going?
For those of you who have been Mormon in the past 10 years, you will recognize Stacey Harkey as one of the founding original members of Studio C, which was kind of a BYU comedy TV show kind of thing that was super popular, 5-10 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, we started in like 2011, and then it just kind of grew in popularity until we left and started our own company. So like over the course of 10 years, yeah.
Yeah. And Stacey, you can find Stacey at Stacey Harkey on Instagram. That's EY and EY for both Stacey and Harkey. But Stacey's an actor. He's a writer. He's a personal trainer. He does DEI, consulting and training. A lot of really cool stuff. But today, it's all about his Mormon story. He was recently featured on the Black Menaces podcast. So I want to give a shout out to the Black Menaces. They do great work. They're also probably the main reason why Stacey's here today, because I met him while they were recording here in the studio. Anyway, Stacey Harkey, there are so many of my listeners and viewers that have been wanting you to come on for so long.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
I hope they're not disappointed.
No, there's no way. No way.
They'd be, he's boring.
No way. So we're going to try and do this just so everyone knows. Stacey's got to get out of here in about 3 hours. So we're going to try and do a one-parter, 3 hours, Stacey's Mormon journey. There's going to be a focus on authenticity. Obviously, there's an LGBTQ focus for those of you who are interested in that.
Spoilers.
Did I just out you?
No. Okay. Well, I mean, we come out every day, right? Like, come on.
But also just a universal story of the Mormon journey and of course, again, a core theme of authenticity. And I'm so delighted to have one of my partners in truth and righteousness, along with Margie, Gerardo Sumano, here to be co-host today. How's it going, Gerardo?
Hi, John. Good.
What's new?
Well, I'm excited for this interview. We have some family members who are big fans of Stacey, so it'll be interesting.
Oh.
We'll see if they listen to the podcast for the first time.
Yeah,
I told Gerardo, I was like, you better roast me. You better go in, just like dig.
Perfect. Well, it's always great to have you here, Gerardo.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, Stacey Harkey, I have to admit, I don't know almost anything about your Mormon story. Like, the first question would be, like, is there such thing as pioneer stock ancestry in your life? Or are you a convert, or are your parents a convert?
Oh, I gotcha.
Where does your Mormon story begin?
I was expecting like a genealogy dive in. I didn't come prepared. Many moons ago. Okay, so fun fact, I did apply for scholarships through the Cherokee Nation, because growing up my whole life, it's like, oh, we're Native American and Black, yada, yada. Did Ancestry.com, and they were like, bruh, you are not Native American. That is English. So maybe I do have some pioneer ancestry in there somewhere. So watch out, y'all. But my family, my parents converted. My mom converted when she was 18. She grew up in a pretty abusive situation. And the church provided, just was immediately a place of peace for her. And so she converted when she was 18, and she's still very active and very committed. And then
Where was she?
She was in Oklahoma, I believe.
Oh,
yeah.
in South.
Oklahoma.
Okay.
Nothing's in Oklahoma. But those two sister missionaries that found her.
Do you know around what age?
I think she was 18.
Okay.
Yeah, she was 18. And she said, she talks about the sister missionaries coming in immediately, just like peace coming into this like tumultuous home. And her dad was the pastor of a church. And so it was like, religion was no new concept, but clearly what these sisters brought was something different, and it resonated with her. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's her story, but like, why would she need another religion when she was raised in a church by a pastor dad? Do you know?
And she grew up in a very abusive home. And so it's not like, I think maybe whatever her dad was serving up wasn't exactly the most convincing of things, but she was always, her whole family's very religious. She was always very religious, very, just like very Christian her whole life. And so I think the transition from I'm not sure what religion it was exactly, but that transition made a lot of sense for her. And the Book of Mormon made a lot of sense for her, and she just like immediately felt really, really good, right? You know, it's like she felt good, and it made sense to her, and so it was like, why not? I think, you know, and I imagine there was some drama there, but with her family, but You know, she's strong-willed. She did her thing. And then she met my dad, and they got married, and then my dad converted. And so probably when he was
probably?
In
Oklahoma? In Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma, I believe it was in Oklahoma. And it was like, we didn't talk about this growing up as a family, but I found his old Book of Mormon. He's like no longer an active member of the church or anything. But he converted after blacks could hold the priesthood. I was like, oh, interesting. Also, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool.
So after 78.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it was probably in the 80s, early 80s at some point.
Okay.
He converted. Yeah. And then he had they got sealed in the temple, and me and my 3 siblings came along. I'm the third of 4 of us. So then we came along, and that's the beginning of little baby Stacey. They moved to Texas. I grew up in like the Dallas area. Pretty much.
What year were you born?
I was born in 88.
Okay.
So don't do the math, y'all. I'm still young. But yeah, so it was, I was born in pretty just like good parents. Okay, my parents divorced when I was 10, but they've always been like really solid, good parents. And we grew up very committed. Even though my father isn't like LDS still, he always had a platform on being involved in the community. And so my family was very involved and in all aspects. And I was the kid that kind of like did everything by the book, right? I was the one that was like I did the grades, and I never like snuck out or anything. I was like, if anything, my parents had to be like, stop reading your book and go to bed. Like I was like that kid. And very just like very duty driven, wanted to make sure I was like getting it all taken care of. Right. And so, I mean, I don't want to skip through childhood, but I feel like most of that was pretty like.
Let me ask this. Were you in a predominantly, I mean, most Mormon wards are white in the United States. Were you in a predominantly white Mormon ward?
Very, very.
And do you have any memories of what that was like as a black family?
Like, I think like a lot of my grappling with my identity and what it means to be black happened later, like as I got into like college. But family was black, extended family. And then, like I said, my parents divorced when I was 10, and then my dad started going to a predominantly Black Baptist church. And so I actually got a scholarship to BYU from this Black Baptist church. So it was like, so like I was very involved. I was very involved at the church. I played in the band in the church and was in like the youth choir and got my
Baptist
Eagle
church.
Scout. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
From that church. They had like split custody. So I would be like 1 week here, 1 week there. I was just like very involved. Like come summer camp time when all the young men in like the LDS church would go to summer camp, I would go to summer camp twice. I'd go with the LDS church, I'd go with the Baptist church.
Whoa.
I loved it though. It was cool.
So it's kind of best of both worlds a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it was really cool to like, I remember at a young age, maybe like 12 or 13, being like comparing, being like, oh, these are things that I think the LDS faith does really well. And I was like, these are things that the Baptist faith does really well. And I really loved having the ability to be like, and I will take them both. You know what I mean? So that was something that I thought was a really cool privilege. Even when it came to like doctrine and how things were talked about, I remember being like, the LDS faith is really good at giving like steps, like equations, like this plus this equals this. And the Baptist faith was really good at being like just like what feels right in your heart, just like honor your heart. Like it was like church was like singing praise and having a good time, where the LDS faith was like grace and more of like the somberness of the moment. You know what I mean? That like the kind of like quiet respect. And it was just cool to have that comparison, right? To be able to experience both of those worlds and kind of compare notes. I remember talking to a Baptist friend about like, oh, like 3 degrees of glory. And he was like, what? And I was like, I know, but like, where's Gandhi going to go? He was all right. And then I learned more about Gandhi and I was like, I'm not going to try to figure out where people are going to go in the next life. But yeah, it was just cool to have that comparison growing up.
Was there ever in your, like during certain years where you preferred one to the other, or did you always?
I was always pretty like, I was all in when it came to the LDS faith. And so I was pretty all in, and I always felt like being a part of the Baptist faith was kind of like a
playing church.
Yeah, what did you say?
Playing church.
Playing church. It just felt like
He's
like
quoting,
an extra.
What's the guy's name?
Brad Wilcox.
Brad Wilcox.
Oh, I was like, I don't know that reference. It felt real, but it just felt like the LDS faith is a higher demand religion. And so it was like, there's just so much many more ways to be involved.
More meat?
Yeah, there's just like more depth in the doctrine too. And by depth, I mean like extensiveness. So like, You know, in the Baptist faith, no one cares about kolob. It's like, what? No. It's like, we're keeping it simple. It's like grace and faith. Be a good person, right?
Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus. And then in the LDS faith, it was like, there's like a million things. And so I feel like they like kind of went really well together, actually. And I just thought, I was like, oh, cool. I'm in this world, but I'm pretty like committed to the LDS faith.
I'm dying to know if you were baptized into both.
No.
Okay.
They were like in the Baptist faith, they're like, were you baptized? You'd be like, yeah. And they don't care where you were baptized. They were like, did you just like get under the water at certain points? So you're good. You know?
Did you ever like have that struggle of like, which is true? Like I remember growing up in Katy, Texas, where there was a huge Baptist contingency there. And they were challenging the validity of Mormon doctrine and theology.
Interesting.
And the Godmakers movie and all that. And so like, there's a point in high school where I'm like, whoa, is my church true? Are other Christian churches true? Did you ever have that kind of?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, it was never like, it never came to a moment where it was like, there was maybe one point in the years, like the decade of going to a Baptist church where someone was like, just mentioned, they were like, we don't do weird stuff like the Mormons. And I remember being like, and like all my friends knew I was LDS at the Baptist church. So everyone's like, huh. And I was like, oh yeah, what do we do? But it was literally just mentioned. No one dove into doctrine. It was just like, hey, like life is hard. We're all struggling. We just trying to be more supportive. We don't have time to be bashing people. You know what I mean?
One more question.
Yeah.
I talked to Rachel in my recent episode of the Black Menaces, Rachel Weaver.
Fun.
She talked about code switching between her Mormon ward, which was predominantly white in South Chicago, and like her black friends at school. Were you code switching, number one, between your Mormon ward and your Baptist congregation, and two, between your Mormon ward and like your friends or your school group?
Oh, like 100%. I feel like code switching it's like generally, and if people aren't familiar, it's like the way you change like your vernacular and how you communicate according to like which groups you're in. And it's used to generally like talk about like how black people coming from like being a minority, we code switch because we speak differently amongst our family and our friends than we would at work in a way to be perceived as professional by other people. But I think we just code switch in every aspect of what we do. Like I think about like the way I talk about like talk around older people that are older than like 70 is very different than the way I talk around people that are my age. And it's different than the way I talk around people who are like teens, you know, and I'm like coaching. So it's like, I just feel like code switching is just like such a common part of life. And the tricky part is like, do you know the code of the community you're in? So to answer your question, yes, tons of code switching, whether it was at the Baptist church or with like, you know, majority black people around who speak a certain way and communicate a certain way. And now when I think about just being queer, in queer spaces, I code switch. And in Mormon spaces, I code switch. It just all over the place, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
It's kind of universal, but...
Oh, I love it too.
Yeah.
Love cracking a code.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess part of me wonders, Rachel and Nate talked about Mormon culture sort of being white culture and then being interchangeable. So going back to that question about race and whiteness and Mormonism,
yeah,
were you ever like feeling out of place in your white Mormon ward? Were you just so universally accepted that you felt comfortable there? Or was there ever even a struggle with black identity versus the whiteness of Mormonism?
My family, we're pretty, like my siblings for the most part, we're all really like pretty extroverted. Like we go to spaces and like insert ourselves. And I like, as I've gotten older, I've come to terms with what that means and how do you harness that. But I was just like, I had friends, lots of friends in the church. I never felt treated like poorly or differently. There were comments and things said when I was younger, but it was just like few and far between. Like I remember once, like the bishop's son was like, we got in an argument and he was like, so messed up. He was like, you're just mad because you're cursed. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like it was the first time I'd actually ever heard anyone mention anything like that.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know, like when you're black and in church, they're not going to be like, hey, let's talk about this thing. So I think people kind of danced around it or just didn't talk about it. I don't know. They didn't believe it. I don't know. But I kind of forgot my train of thought where I was going. The code switching.
That's a. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and just I do think that like one thing that I love about growing up LDS was I feel like I kind of talk about it like assimilation. Like I had the chance to learn how white people interact, it's just a little different. So for example, in the black community, it could be seen, especially traditionally back in the day, if you're like staring someone in the eyes, it could be seen as a challenge or disrespectful. But in like the white community, that's how like you show respect. That's how you show trustworthiness. It's like I'm looking you in the eyes. So those are aspects where I was like, oh, interesting. This is a different thing. And one's not bad and one's not good. They're just different. Well, where a majority of people are white, I think it was really helpful to be like, now I know the language. I know the code of how to interact in different spaces.
Yeah.
Love it.
Maybe we're beating a bit dead horse, but there seems to be this idea of Mormonism, though, that white culture in Mormonism is the right and correct culture and the superior one. You know, we have Apostle Quentin L. Cook a couple of years ago talking in general conference about how the culture of the church is the correct culture and every other culture in the world is inferior to the LDS Church culture.
Oh yeah, I'm not super familiar with that.
But it seems like you never really thought it about like that way.
Well, I think and I think part of that is like the human nature aspect of like we assume the way we were taught is the right way, and everything else is like, oh yeah, like you do things a little weird, you're a little different, and you think about food, and you're like, I'm not going to eat that like weird cow eye because that's wrong, but like in another culture that is like a delicacy, whatever. I think the point there is just that, especially in a place where you don't have a lot of diversity, you're just not introduced to a lot of things. So why would you think like this is wrong? You're just like, this is just the way things are. And I remember thinking that too. I mean, even coming from like a black perspective, there are things that I'm like, well, white people do kind of weird stuff sometimes. I don't know if they got it right. But I think part of that is because that's just the way I was taught. And so that I like hold on to that as like a pillar for me. But in actuality, I don't think it's wrong to be, it's not wrong. It's just it's just normal humanity. I do think that is pretty bold calling anything inferior, beyond your own. And I think a lot of people would probably challenge that no matter what front they're on. And if they wouldn't, that's a whole other thing to unpack, right?
Yeah.
It's super weird.
So, Stacey, it might surprise you, half our audience has never been Mormon. So just really quickly,
what?
Does it surprise you? Yeah.
That is kind of wild.
So for those who are kind of newer to Mormon culture, Mormonism has baked into its scripture and its doctrine and theology the Curse of Cain, which Stacey just referred to, which is that when Cain killed Abel in the Bible, God, the mark that the Bible talks about, Mormon scripture interprets as dark skin. And then the Book of Abraham, the Book of Moses, the Doctrine and Covenants, they all perpetuate the idea that black skin results as a curse from God cursing Cain for killing Abel. And then, of course, in the Book of Mormon, there's the whole dark skin associated with the curse of wickedness and to make the Lamanites loathsome. And finally, there's the priesthood ban where black people of African descent, actually some people of African descent, were denied priesthood and temple blessings until 1978. Let's say pre-college, pre-BYU, did any of that stuff, other than that silly comment, even in seminary, let's say in high school, did any of those teachings come up? Were you made aware of them? Did you struggle with them, or were you totally
I think it's
unaware
really
of them?
interesting. When you say like it's baked into the theology, it's really tricky because theology changes. It just does, right? It just changes. Think about the way we talk about women versus like 10, 20, 30 years ago. The way we talk about minorities, it just changes. And so I think by the time I was like in my teen years, if people believed that sincerely, they didn't talk about it. And so it was, and I remember there was a point when, because of the comment from my bishop's son, I was like, well, let me dig into, what is he talking about? And I remember asking like my mom, and she was like, some people believe it. I was like, how are you not going to tell me? But she, in her experience, she was like, first off, that doesn't align with a God I know. That doesn't make sense. And so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to stick to the things I know. And the things I don't know, I'm not going to worry about them. I'm going to let someone else worry about those. Not on my plate. And I kind of adopted that. But it was kind of before the time of internet. Wow. And so I did do a lot. I remember being in the library at school, looking things up, trying to understand more about this, until I came to the conclusion too, where I was like, because there were things I found from people that were saying that's not the case, like leaders of the church, and then things that were saying that is the case. And so I was like, okay, there's a lot of confusion here. I'm going to stick to what I know and what I feel good about and not worry about some of that other stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Which can which can last sometimes, can work in some situations for a time. But yeah, when it came to that theology, that was never something that was like talked about over the pulpit. It was never preached. If it did come up in like a leadership role, like I remember at BYU, it came up, and not even in like in one of the classes, I took a Book of Mormon class. It was always done with such, like everyone knew that was like a minefield. And so, yeah, no, I've never in a situation where someone was like, and the blacks were the curse of Cain. You got to deal with it. Like it was never that energy, right? It was never like talked about or presented in that way.
Yeah,
that's
interesting. It's very interesting how different how at least you experienced this doctrine versus how maybe Latinos experienced it, right?
Oh, interesting.
Just a few, what about like a year ago, I called my mom once and I asked her, hey mom, is it your understanding that the reason why we're brown, boy, Mexicans, we're brown, is because Layman and Lamra were cursed with a dark skin? And she was like, yeah. Oh. So it's
like,
in Mexico and Latin America, the curse of the Lamanites is embraced as, yeah, that's why we're brown.
They're proud of it. Our Latin America, I mean, I served in Guatemala.
Yeah.
They were proud to call themselves Lamanites.
Yeah.
You're just mad because you're descendant of Nephi. That's why you're burning.
But we were not marginalized by the church like black people were, right?
There's like there's like all sorts of things at play because the church is like an American church and has its own slew of problems, and then add the theology on top of that and beliefs and like like it could get really befuddled. Yeah. And so I know in my experience too, like my experience is very, unique to me.
Yeah.
And so like some other people, like maybe Rachel or Nate, have had very different experiences with over the pulpit, how people might have talked about it. But
no, I mean, this is so fascinating, Gerardo. Thanks for bringing that up. Like I grew up in a seminary class, all white, just a few hours drive from where you grew up,
that's
right?
Wild. I didn't know Katy, Texas. That's cool.
Yeah. And my seminary teacher held nothing back to teach us all the blacks were fed sitters in the pre-existence, and that's why they were cursed. But he probably wouldn't have been as willing to say that if there were a black student in the room. Right. So like presence, I mean, this is probably a DEI point, representation presence can be a really important part of fighting bigotry.
Could you imagine that meeting where they're like, all right, this week in church, we're going to talk about the curse of Cain, and having someone black
waving
in there.
to your family in the pews.
Yeah, someone in the black would have been like, how about we just focus on Jesus? What do you think? That's so interesting. And I do look back and I think I wonder if maybe things were talked about with more care because I was there. I don't know though. How do you know?
Maybe not.
But I do feel like a majority of, there's very few people I know nowadays, like really know, and we've talked about, like that are LDS or were LDS that really believed that the curse of Cain was like, sometimes they're like, oh, it was like a weird interpretation. Like, everyone has a weird, everyone's trying to resolve that cognitive dissonance of like racism wrong, but this feels racist. So how do we justify?
Yeah.
And like everyone has different ways of resolving those concerns.
And it sounds like with your family, and this is common in all races, is just like a practical approach to the gospel. Is it working for me? Does it make it happy?
Yeah.
Does it make us happy? Is it good for my family? Then the tough stuff we're going to not feed.
Right. It's like my family wasn't like, okay, let's talk about, and I keep bringing up Kolob because there's like a song about it. And I know some people I feel like some people get bored with the gospel and they're like, how can we make this more complex? So they're like, let's find that star that's closest to where God lives. And I'm like, we're struggling in life right now. Like, I don't know about where y'all are from, but like my family's struggling. We don't care about the nearest star to you know what I mean? But there's a lot of stuff I think that was like peripheral where we were like, it doesn't matter to us if this prophet was on a hill or a wall. Like, there's like things like that I'm just like.
Totally.
And some people do, that is important to them. But for me, I've always been like a feelings guy.
Love it.
How do I feel?
So let's shift gears a tiny bit, unless there's something else you want to cover. As you're getting into your teen and adolescent years and you're starting to hit puberty and kind of your sexual development, contrasting with the Mormon teachings about law of chastity and heterosexual relationships, talk about just unless there's something else you want to cover.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I think that's great.
So what was that like to come of age as a Mormon?
Man. puberty, queer puberty. I don't think that's what it's called. It's just puberty. It honestly wasn't a big deal growing up. I do remember I knew that something was wrong with me. I knew I was like, okay, this isn't right. I know this isn't right. And I was like, because you get that feedback as kids, you pick up things, whether people like it or not. And you're like, okay. So like boys who learn that boys don't cry, whether it's a sexuality thing or not, it's like, you're just like, okay, you get that feedback. Boys don't cry. We sweep that under the rug and we move on. With my sexuality, I had feedback that like, I just all over, right? I'm in Texas. I'm growing up LDS. I'm part of a black family. Like, all the feedback was like wrong. So that was really just swept it under, and it wasn't really a huge deal. Yes, I had a crush on my health teacher who was like a cheerleader in college and played hockey. I wonder if I saw him now, I'd be like, what was I thinking? But like, and I did have like crushes on other kids, but it was always pretty reined in, right? In the sense of I was always like, oh, like you feel this way about someone, but just treat them like a friend. And so in school, I think that's what contributed to me being so studious is I was like, I just like threw myself into school and like was very involved in things, just like overachiever, which is pretty common with people who grow up queer in spaces that aren't welcoming to queer. It's like queerness. It's like, we gotta succeed somewhere because we're doing it in the sexuality category. But yeah, puberty was cool. It was vibing. Like, at that point, I was like, okay, this is wrong. I'm probably bi and have a thorn in my side, like a weaknesses thing. But that all came and really hit the fan when I got back from my mission is when I had to really start grappling with sexuality. Because to jump forward in the story.
Did you try and date in high school? And if so, how did that go?
Like, there was one girl that liked me and I was like, oh, I like her too. And we like spent time together and maybe she wanted to hold my hand, but that was like the extent, like nothing. You
just kind of packed it down.
Oh yeah. I was like, listen, I found that locked trunk and I put it in a safe and I buried it in my basement and I lived my life and I didn't have to think about it. It worked so well. So, I graduate, I decide. So at one point.
Did you do seminary and did you kind of get fully, I don't want to say indoctrinated, did you get the full Mormon doctrine theology kind of treatment?
I did early morning seminary. I did. So when my parents divorced at 10 and they were pretty chill about where we wanted to live. They were like, as long as you have a good reason, you can live with whoever you want. So I lived with my dad most of my life, who was Baptist, but like frequented the LDS faith. And while I was living with my dad, I wanted to start prepping for my mission. So I started going to early morning seminary and he was like, I'm not going to take you. 6 a.m.? No, that's not of the Lord. And so I had there was a neighbor who was LDS, and I would ride with their son or their kids. We would carpool together, which was great. We were all good friends and stuff. But I always feel like maybe I was never cut out for that because I don't remember too much as far as like learning good things. And I've never been good at memorizing stuff. So I'm like, maybe I know a scripture or two still. But yeah, I never felt like I was replacing information with new information. Like I was out with the old, just adding on to the things I'd learned growing up, I guess. Yeah. That's how I saw seminary.
And did your acting or theatrical sort of chops sort of develop in middle and high school? You
know what? I didn't do any. So Texas, right? I go to this little high school called Little Elm, Texas. When we first moved there, it was just trailer parks and cows, and it stayed that way for a while. But at one point, I was in high school, senior year. I was like, I think I might want to be in theater or perform or act. And I go to the. Sorry, this is a crazy story. I don't know. I'm laughing. I go to the head of the theater department or whatever the professor was. And I was like, hey, I think I want to be in the play. And she looked me up and down and she was like, I don't think we have black roles. Oh, wow. I did that terrible. I'm this little shy high school kid that I was really shy growing up. I would break into just sweating if I had to chat with people, period. It was just so stressful. And I just changed schools senior year to live with my mom and prep for my mission. So I was in a new school, didn't know anyone. I was like, I'm going to do this thing. And she was like, no coloreds allowed. She put that sign up and I was like, oh, okay. And I look back and the show was Little Shop of Horrors, where it's I've told people that and they're like, that's the show? It wasn't even an old Southern, Gone with the Wind or something. But yeah, that was the show. Wow. So yeah, that was an experience I had growing up and I was like, all right, cool. I didn't say cool, but I was just like, oh, Okay.
So other than academics, did you have like strong hobbies or interests that of defined your identity?
I played in the band, and I've always loved like creativity, right?
What was your interest again? Your instrument again?
I played the trombone.
Okay.
Watch out. But that's been a long time ago.
Okay.
So to claim band now feels disingenuous, but I was always very involved. I did band, and then I was in scouts, and I loved doing scouts, and I was always like, I love presenting.
Baptist scouts.
Not
Mormon scouts.
It's different. It actually was a little different. I remember there were some kids that got spanked at camp once.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being like, he needs to learn. This discipline was different. We looked at it differently back then. But yeah, and I played soccer. Like, those were some of my hobbies growing up. I was always like, we were a very active family. There was a time where we would like wake up and work out together as a family, which is wild, but it was really fun. We'd work out together and then jog down the corner to get donuts. And I think that's a beautiful balance. I like that.
And just to kind of put a cap on your high school years, would you say overall you had a great or good Mormon experience?
Oh,
and
man.
Was there ever any kind of unpleasant bishop kind of worthiness kind of interactions?
Dude, my adolescence growing up LDS was kind of awesome. It was great. I had chances to get leadership opportunities. I had a chance to have a built-in community. My family struggled often, especially when living with my mom, and we just had community members that would just like lift us up. They're still some of my good friends to this day, still doing dinner with some of these families who've like moved up here to Utah. It was a great experience. And that's not the case for everyone in my family. Like, some of my siblings didn't have as positive experiences, and I've always felt like they were very valid and how they like navigated their experiences with the church. Because I'm like looking at it, I'm like, yeah, why would you go somewhere where you were like tortured and bullied as a kid? That makes no sense. Do your thing. Yeah. And I also think growing up in the LDS space and in a Baptist space, like my dad was always just like, be a good person. Like just be good, be involved. And so I think we had a little bit of freedom to explore what that meant for us. Like I know my mom really wanted me to go on a mission, and it was very important to her that like me and my brother held the priesthood and like did the thing. But like, I feel like at the other end, I had this parent that was very encouraging of anything, like my dad. So I do a year at BYU. I'm getting ready to go on my mission. My dad's taking me to the airport, and he's like, hey, I don't know if he's going to be embarrassed if I say this. Two things, but one of them, he was like, you don't have to go. We're at the airport, and he's like, you don't have to go. And I was like, no, Dad, I really want to. He's like, all right, if you want to, that's great, but you do not have to go. And anytime you want to come home, you just let me know. And I thought that was really nice, having that like I never was like, I'm going to lose my family if this doesn't work out. And then he also handed me a box of condoms, and he was like, take these. And I was like, oh, no, Dad, no, the mission's different. He's like, you just never know. I was like, all right, Dad. Yeah, I'm not going to take those. But because the last thing I wanted was to open my suitcase and like my companion being like, bruh. I did have a cell phone I took from home on my mission the whole time. Oh, but wow. I took it apart because I was like, I'm going to be a good missionary. I was in Brazil too. So like, I don't think the phone plan would have worked.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Was BYU, just really quickly, like Oz? Was it a culture shock?
Oh,
Did you love it?
It was a culture shock, but I loved it. It was like I came to Utah, and all of a sudden I was like, this isn't Texas anymore. I was going to say Kansas. But I was like, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Like, whoa. Very new experiences. I loved my freshman year of college. I made
dorms?
In the dorms. Made so many friends. Some people, there was some weird stuff I encountered. Like, I remember in college, this kid from Idaho just being like, he like pulled me aside. We were like friends, right? And he pulls me aside and he's like, hey, I just want you to know, you're only here because you're black. And I was like,
affirmative action.
Yeah, and he was talking, and he was almost doing it like, this is going to be tough for you. I'm going to give you a heads up, though. He ended up dropping out of school because it was too hard for him. And I remember that really, really, really bothered me. Like, I was like, and like college was already very different. And I'm this poor kid who barely was able to get to college. I had a counselor that a bishop put me in contact with who helped me figure out different financial aid things. And I applied for financial aid like it was my job, because there was no way my family could have paid for college. So to have this kid pull me aside, I was like, oh, crap. And then one day, like a couple of days later, he asked me to proofread an essay for him. And I remember reading it, and I was like, you got into BYU? Like, I was like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, if you, I was like, I literally, it was so poorly written. I hope if he's watching this, I'm saying this in love. No, but it was so poorly written, and it gave me so much confidence to be at school again. I was like, you know what? I'm okay. This is the caliber, and that's literally all I needed to have my confidence come back. So there were a couple things like that, and people weren't used to being around a lot of diversity, and so there was weird things, but people that said them in like, like in moments that we all have where we say something and we don't know it's wrong, and we're like, crap, sorry. Like a lot of those moments, So
Stacey, if you ever get a chance to listen to Gerardo's interview, I think you might find it interesting. Gerardo, I'm thinking about your story, and I actually am seeing a lot of parallels between your story and Stacey's.
being brown, huh?
But no, I didn't mean that.
I wasn't even like in a weird way. I was just like solidarity.
But that's cool. It's probably that too. But like the one big difference is like, Gerardo, I think you were a lot more conflicted about your sexuality in high school to the point where wasn't your mom lining you up with David Matheson to do kind of conversion therapy over Skype, like while in high school. And I'm trying to account for like why you were tormented over that, but why Stacey, it was just kind of a non-issue. And it could just be like personality type, right?
I think too. I just locked it deeply, deeply away in that chest, in that safe, under my basement. And what I didn't realize was that like you can't
pressure built up.
You cannot stifle that. But freshman year, high school, we're Gucci. Freshman year of college, bam, we're good. Right? Go on a mission. Everybody's in the same boat. No one's dating or anything. Some of these little straight boys really had a hard time with it. And I was like, okay, but like I'm gay and, I'm like, this has been my whole life.
Yeah.
But when I get back from the mission is when I was like, oh shoot, the bomb went off, right? But up to that moment, like I loved my mission. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because when I came back from my mission, I already knew I was gay. It hadn't gone away. The therapy hadn't worked, and there was definitely something wrong with the idea that it could be fixed, right? Because it didn't get fixed.
The idea of conversion therapy.
my experience was way different, and I'm not. It probably has to do also with the family and the type of the family I had. My parents were really like both returned missionaries. Like my dad on leadership of the church, like stake presidency and stuff. So very, very strict, and the high expectations, from like. So for me, going to seminary was not like, it's nice. I'm going to have my neighbor drive me to seminary. Yeah. For me, it was like, go to seminary or die. Like there's no other option.
See, I had the option to go to seminary, and I chose to wake up butt crack of dawn to go, And I didn't have this, like, there was no, at least growing up, I don't ever really even remember thinking about church or not, but I never had the feeling that I was going to lose support and love if that didn't work out. Because I had siblings who were like, kind of like did things their own way, and while it did, like my mom was like, okay, well let's my dad, it was like super chill. My dad was cool about it. He was like we always had that like love and belonging was always going to be there. So that's kind of wild.
That's a tiny bit counterintuitive, because I would think that pressure and expectation would make you less likely to question or have a conflict, but in maybe being forced against your will to do something causes more internal conflict, in your case, Gerardo, than for you, Stacey, that was doing it because you loved it and you found value in it and you didn't feel forced to do it. That's counterintuitive, but it makes
wild,
total sense.
And a little bit of adversity too, right? Like, because right now, like just listening how you talk about the church and your experience, like it's very different from how I would frame my experience in the church, even though there's a lot of similarity. I mean, there was plenty of positive things in my for me growing up in the church, but the way I would express about the church is way different. And I think part of it is the way that I was forced into it or felt like I would lose the love and support from my parents if I didn't like do it. So now there's a lot more aversion with the idea of church and what church does to people than like the way you, for example, you talk about it.
Yeah, it was never like this like prison that I couldn't leave, and like I could only look out the window and could long. I think there were times when I even was like commitment wise, like I probably always did the same thing, but commitment wise would just like oscillate and stuff. So like I can imagine it's like being in a prison where you're like hand on the glass and you're like, the grass is outside and people look free.
That's how
and my situation was like this open gazebo that I could just step out of if I wanted to and back in. And I was like, well, it's comfy. I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
Like maybe I think there probably is a lot to figure in it. I think probably like how we are as people probably figures in a lot too. But
personality type.
Yeah, personality. But
you're
like
kind
family.
of a yellow. Are you a bit of a yellow?
I don't know what that means, but yeah. Is that just like, is that more like fun and like, yeah, I'm very like go with the flow. It's all the fun. And that's one thing I love about fitness. I teach fitness classes and I personal train and I love the struggle. I'm like, ooh, if you're struggling, that's part of fun. So maybe even like from a religious perspective, I'm like, yeah, life is supposed to be hard and that's how we grow. And like being gay, I might have a crush on boys, but I gotta fight it. And I'm gonna, what fun. Yeah, the challenge. I do love a good challenge. That one though, didn't pan out like I thought it would.
Long term.
Yeah.
Long term. Okay, so I have to ask you this about your mission.
Please.
In addition to anything else you want to talk about
Ask
your mission?
me anything. Love the mission.
I'm guessing you know that, like, if you had to list one major contributing factor to the priesthood ban in 1978 being lifted, it would be Brazil.
It'd be Brazil.
Because Spencer B. Kimball loved the Lamanites, which are the Latin Americans, right? And at some point, and Brazilians, they're, why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
I just love that. Like, I could see it being like, Dear Diary, love me some Lamanites.
It's
like,
true.
Like, oh, what a weird way to phrase it.
But he loved the Lamanites. He felt like it was his personal mission to like help them blossom like a rose, which in his mind meant become more white.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be shocking, but that it's written. But then he finds out that even though missionaries weren't supposed to be baptizing people with even a drop of African blood, it wasn't until the missions had been going in Brazil for decades and decades that he realized they'd been baptizing people in droves with African blood. Yeah.
More numbers or get that drop of blood. Like, what a conundrum.
But I don't think even he knew, because I mean, genetics didn't really exist back then.
And the way Brazilians look at race is different. What it means to be black in Brazil is different than what it means to be black in America.
How so?
I just remember... I remember being in Brazil and I was like standing by this dude who has a similar nose like mine and similar hair like mine. And I literally was like, you know what it's like being black? And he was like, I'm not black. And I was like, play it. What you talking about? Like, you're black. And he was like, no, I'm not. He was like, look at my skin. And to his point, his skin was very like, he was pretty light skinned. He was like closer to your color, John. And it had a moment where I was like, oh, it's different here. I was going off of like features and like maybe, you know, some of these elements. And he was literally just like skin tone.
Yeah.
Now my dad's pretty light skinned and my family, I have an uncle with like gray eyes, I guess blue. But they're pretty light skinned, which is why we thought we had Cherokee, you know, Native American blood in us. And so, but that never, and even in America, that if you got any black in you, it's like the one drop thing, you're black. You're part of the gang. But if you look white, and that comes into features too, then that's the way you are going to be treated is going to be a little different. Brazil was like, they just did it differently, and it had me thinking of race. I was like, oh, this is different. It's just not the same everywhere. Yeah, it was interesting.
So I guess I'm just wondering if the priesthood ban stuff resurfaced while you were in Brazil.
Oh, if anything, I do think Brazil helped a lot, like helped me feel so much more comfortable in the church space. Now, this is not something I realized, but going to Utah is an incredibly, you know, Utah to Texas. Utah's very, 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 very white, very predominantly LDS. When I would leave Utah, I would let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. This like tension I didn't realize. I'd be like, oh yeah, people look like me. And in Brazil, the average height of men is like probably around 5'6". I blended in. And everyone was brown. I was like, this is nice. Like I wasn't just like constantly sticking out. And that was really nice. And to get that from like an LDS perspective too, being like in the LDS Church, it was all like that. It was really cool. But I do think that was my awakening when I started being like freshman year at BYU actually started having me thinking about race differently and the effect it had. You know, it's had on everyone and the negative effect. And in Brazil, I was noticing the standard of beauty was was put more like, it's like, oh, white people. And I was starting to get like, oh man, there's some messed up stuff going on, in the world.
Yeah. So overall, just your experience as a missionary, baptizing, converting people, all that.
Dude, it was great. The mission was just like literally us going around trying to helping people. We did a ton of service projects, and like I sold security systems before my mission because I was like, this will be good prep. Gotta suffer growth, and the mission was like doing that, but for something I believed in, which was really easy. And it was like you meet people and they have hard lives and they're looking for hope. And I'm like, hey, here's something that could give you hope and could help provide some structure. And seeing them blossom. And I was like, it was great. I loved it. It was cool.
Did you ever have missionaries try and talk to you about like some of the problematic doctrine or theology, or not really?
No, that was the first time on the mission though, where someone was like, they were like, the Bible's allegorical. And I was like, what? Like in my home, we were like, Noah's Ark was real. The world was flooded. The rainbow is a sign. It was like
6,000 year
everything.
Earth.
Yeah, everything was very literal. And so to have it be presented in a not literal way blew my mind. And then when I would think like science, I'd be like, oh, there are some discrepancies. Like that's a big boat and that's a lot of animals. And I was like, you know what? I could probably see that, but I didn't really care though, because like whether Noah's Ark was real or not, like didn't change how I felt about the things I was doing, right? Like it just didn't matter to me.
Wow.
Nice.
I don't know.
Well, so far you're living the Mormon dream.
The Mormon dream. And then I come home from the mission and the
really
next
quickly,
part. Oh,
living with men constantly and never being it's kind of a bit of a stereotypical question, but it's like, was that ever hard to be living with a man for 2 years,
No.
Did you ever have a crush on a missionary kind of thing?
Nah, dude.
You just packed it down.
Nah, not straight boys. No, gross. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think, no, it wasn't tough at all because
He just said gross, straight boys gross, Gerardo.
Gerardo, you know what I'm talking about.
You asked me the same thing on my interview several years ago, and it was
Only
hard
because
for me
it's
to
what
answer.
straight people would assume.
Yeah.
And I like to dispel stereotypes,
but
right?
I was gonna
I wouldn't expect you to.
Yeah.
But I like to ask that
I think
for
that's
the
a
people.
fair question.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
But I felt the same way as you did. I never had a crush on any of my companions.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if like I had a companion who had the right like vibe or something, I'd be like, oh, and I think there's a fine line between crush and adoration and respect. And I think some of those lines were like blurred mentally, like my neurons were not quite sure how to like, so I'd be like, oh, he's really cool. I want to be his friend. And now if I had that same feeling, I think I'd be like, how soon can we kiss? I don't know. But on the mission, it was like, I've always had more male friends anyways. Like I was just like, I always had more guy friends growing up and then sports. And then like, so it was never, the mission was never weird at all. But there was no pressure to date, which was cool. Because I was like, don't have to think about that. And everyone else was in the same boat. Suckers.
Right. Okay. All right. So you end your mission at 21 and then go back to BYU?
Yeah, I finished my mission. I go back to BYU. And right before I go back, mission president's like, yo, time to multiply and replenish. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm a duty-driven, I do everything by the book. I was like, yes, sir. And so I get back from my mission. I'm like, we're going to get married. Child, that was tough. I dated one girl. She was on her mission still. And we were like writing each other. And then she came back and we dated for like 6 months.
Someone you met on your mission, Brazil?
We met before freshman year and she went on a mission to like France.
Okay.
And then I went to Brazil and it was like, your parents were like the cute story of like, return missionary couple, power couple. We got this. We vibed really well. She's a really good friend. But there was a point, and I think too, not to be too explicit or whatever, but like I was like 21 and a guy. I could have been aroused making out with a tree. No offense to her. So I think there were times when I was like, oh, like making out's like super fun. And then people would be like, but don't go too far. And I was like, why would you? There's no need, no desire. But there was a point when I started saving up for a ring. But I was like, oh, this whole thing rumbled in the basement that I had buried away. And I remember being like, God, like I will not marry a woman if I am not like attracted to her. Like she needs someone to be ravenous about her body, right? I thought some like women deserve that. People deserve that in relationships. And so I was like, I don't know how I had that foresight because my family didn't talk about attraction and sex much, but I just remember being like, no, this is I'm not quite, like, I like kissing, but that's the extent. I don't want anything else. And so I remember breaking it off, being like, yeah, maybe we're just not panned out. Maybe we're not the right,
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, with my husband, that's how he did it.
Oh, got you. With girls. I think with you,
girls,
and I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Go ahead.
And then it just happened. Like I dated.
Was that your sophomore year, right after your mission?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
what about? Did you ever hear anything about the church's teachings on interracial marriage?
Girl, there was that's like part of that stuff that I think would lump into like old church doctrine and stuff, where you're just like I remember being at a young age thinking like sometimes people get it wrong, and if the church has people involved, sometimes people get it wrong, and so there was this like category I had where I was like, they got it wrong.
Oh,
so I remember.
But you had heard that the church had discouraged.
Well, I remember hearing that at one point, and I don't know anyone there was like one girl I asked out once who was like, I don't date black guys, who was LDS, but I was like one. I haven't met anyone who was like, yeah, white people should date only white people, right? Like no one.
Well, I'll tell you, my husband's grandma, before I met him.
Oh, see,
she, but not too long before I met him, he told them, like all the grandkids, like, oh, I'm doing the family history and there's and we're pure. Our blood is pure. Meaning that there's no black blood in their ancestry.
But I feel like if you heard that from a grandparent, wouldn't everyone just like side eye each other and be like, all right, Meemaw's off the rocker?
Yeah, I think most of the grandkids were like, Grandma, you don't say that, like that kind of stuff. But like, there's still Mormons alive today who believe interracial marriage shouldn't be done.
That's so wild.
Maybe in Utah, majority.
Yeah, and I feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know, I'm black. I've never been white in a white family. I don't know what those conversations are like, but I'd like to think if at least, I mean, that's another thing too, is like, if someone doesn't want to date me because I am black, they saved me time. They saved me time because why would I want to date them? Yeah. Like, listen, we are just different roads. Yeah. You go down your little racist road, I'm gonna be like over here. But I'm like, I just feel like stuff like that. If I met someone who was like, well, it's tough because grandma doesn't, I'd be like, hey, listen, we already know what we need to about each other. If you can't stand up for something you feel is right, then you're in that basket. I'm over here. Wish you the best.
I'm gonna just note something right now that I think is a theme that I'm noticing that I think is going to be persistent through your story. Maybe not. There is an intellectual and an emotional and a psychological resilience that you have that I didn't have, and that I don't want to demean you or anyone else, Gerardo.
Yeah, Gerardo definitely didn't have. I'm just kidding.
It's not like an unawareness of problems. It's just like, I'm going to focus on the good. I'm not going to get caught up on the hard or the confusing or the inconsistent. And I'm just going to make the most of what's in front of me because it's working for me.
Yeah. I do think that is like a style I have. But I also really, really, really love, like, it's the challenge aspect. Like, I do not run from tough questions. I want to sit with them. I want to be like, look them in the face. Like, if I have concerns with people, I'm like, let's talk. Why? Let me tell you why I hate you. Like, not like that, but it's just like, I want to, like, whenever there's disagreements, my go-to is like, let's sit, let's face it, let's sit in it. So, and that is like interesting. It's like this dichotomy of being like, I don't get this, whatever, I'm not worried about it. And then like this also like being down to dive into it. So when things would come up and I wasn't like, they didn't just like blow off my back, then I would like sit with them, which is a theme that comes up later, but yeah.
Okay. So that first dating experience didn't work out.
Didn't work out. It was good. She was cool.
Did up until that point, so like your first potential engagement post-mission, had you come out, quotes, to anyone as bisexual or as having what the church would have called same-sex attraction or as gay, any of that?
I think I spoke to a bishop about it once in high school. I was very, very... like, and this is something I got from my mom, where it's like, and I think this is how she was able to think through some of the things in like the LDS faith that were maybe like some of the things with race, where she's like, my relationship is between me and God. Everything else is here to facilitate that. So I would like, anytime I slipped up as a kid, if I like masturbated, if I was like in the bishop's office and I was like, I'm doing the hard thing, I'm staring shame in the face, I am calling it what it is, and I think those poor bishops probably got tired of me. I was a teen, I was there a lot. But that carried through, like whether it was like on my mission or future as like a young adult, I was always like in there like, hey, I am not going to let the fear keep me from like doing this thing I feel is important. So like,
but did you ever come out to them?
In a couple cases, like in my first bishop, the first time I went to go talk to the bishop, I was like, I think I might have said I struggle with same gender attraction, and he was like, oh, like he didn't super love, like his sons were some of my good friends, right? Like super cool guy. He was like a lawyer. I wonder what he's up to these days, but he was just like, hey. I remember him just essentially being like, and I think this has a lot to do with my experience in the church too. He was like, hey, you're doing good. You're doing all right. You're doing good. You just keep trying your best.
That's cool.
So he didn't shame me. He didn't like, whoa. I think I was probably shaming myself enough. But I was also I just never wanted to run from those tough things. So I was like, if fear ever felt like it got in the way of me doing something I felt was right, I'd be like, oh, F you, I'm doing it. I'm having a meeting. I'm going to have my mom drive me to the church. I think I talked to other bishops later, but I'm trying to think of I think after that I was like, no, I didn't really come out to bishops much unless I felt like it was relevant, unless I was like, I'm struggling. And so when I did come to a point, struggling with same gender attraction. So I did come to a point when I started like settling with that. And I've dated a couple more girls. One girl I dated for like 8 months. She was amazing. I dated her when in like 2000, it must have been 9 or 10. And then I literally talked to her the other day and I was like, hey, I hope that never made you feel bad. Like it really was just me. But once again, I started like, we dated, it was great. We got along really well. And then when it came to like taking it to the next level, like engagement or something, I was like, we're missing some key pieces. And that like thing that I had buried and locked away in my basement starting to like the ground floor starting to shake. And I'm like, maybe I need to look at this thing. And so after her, I dated 2 girls pretty seriously. Then I dated one girl for like 2 months and she went on a mission. And I was so relieved. And I was like, that's not a good sign. She always wanted to make out. And at that point I was like, oh, this is not that fun. Oh man. And I think at that point,
did you pray to Heavenly Father to take that away?
Every single day. This is embarrassing. I prayed for 2 things, especially through high school. I prayed that God would, make me straight, would take away that struggle, and I prayed that He would make me an X-Man. I would be like, give me powers.
Which one?
Both of them. I'd be like, if you got to give me one, give me the powers. I'll work with the other
which
one.
X-Man?
Oh, I don't know. I was just like, give me some. I just thought powers were cool. Then after high school, I think I phased out of that. And I was just like, make me straight. Please make me straight. Every day on the mission, I do remember thinking like, I'm going to do my best. And I'm going to show God that I'm willing to do everything. And He's going to make me straight. Came home from the mission. I was like, shoot. Little tingling when a hot boy walks by, still there, doggone it. And then I was like, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to date women and I'm going to go to the point that I can do all that I can. And then God's got to like wave His magic wand and take away my attraction to men. He's got to like, I don't know how He does it. He's got to do it. And then I like did it. And I went so far with these women as far as like relationships could go. And then I was like, it feels beyond this manipulative. I had a bishop tell me, he was like, you just gotta marry a woman. And once you try the forbidden fruit, you'll be straight. And I was like, dude, I don't know. At this point, I think the church had come up with like a Mormons and Gays website.
Yeah.
And I
was going to ask, where were you getting this idea that who told you that?
I think I'd heard some horror stories. I'm trying to think of where I don't know. I'm trying to think of where I knew that I was like, things have to happen. Because I remember thinking, I was like, if I go through with this and it doesn't change, I have ruined her life. This is not about me. And if I try to just treat it like it's about me, it's incredibly selfish. Like this is someone else. So if we get married and I make that commitment to someone lifelong and then I'm not even attracted to them,
but I mean, where were you getting the idea that God was going to take it away, that you could just pray it away.
God could do anything. Oh. You know what I mean? Like if he could make Lamanites go white, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like if God could split the ocean and build a boat big enough for all these animals, if God can literally do anything, then why is this out of his scope? Why? You know what I mean? God can do anything. And I'd heard stories too. You hear stories about people being like, especially back then, no one said gay, right? Yeah. But then I started hearing stuff where it's like, he's making it work. And like my attraction to a woman is like it's working. But I was like, okay, good for you. But I need to fill this for me. I'm not just going to like marry a woman and be like, whoops. Yeah. Like what's going on? Like am I healed? And so I did at this point. And at this point too, I'm like kind of coming to terms with this, like who I am and like my value as an individual. And so I think I was like, you know what? After that girl I dated for 2 months, I was like, we're going to take a break. I'm just going to I think at this point I told God, I was like, all right, if you're not going to zoot the gay away or something, then I think I'm just going to be single. I'm going to be single. I'm going to be committed to whatever. I was teaching stake seminary. I was teaching with other young adults. I was involved in the Elders Quorum presidency. I'm like an involved person, so I like being involved. And so I committed to that single life. And it was the unhappiest I'd ever been. Immediately I was like, and I think at this point, that little basement thing that I had in the chest, in the safe, locked away in the basement, started like cracking a bit. And then like ruptured, and I was like, oh shoot, I can't ignore this anymore. And then it just like exploded. It just tore the foundation of what I knew to be like happiness and the future and what life meant for me. It just like erupted.
How so?
In the sense of like, it was like the final straw of me trying to date that girl. And then like, it's not happening. And I was like, shoot, the gay's not going away. And I think I remember admitting to myself, I was like looking in the mirror and I was like, it was like Jim Carrey in Liar Liar when he's trying to say the pin is red or something or blue, but he can't lie. And he's like, it's like, it was me trying to just say I'm gay. I was looking in the mirror and I was like, I'm gay. But what that meant for me was my expectations about what life was supposed to be like just came crumbling down. I did everything by the book. I was like, now I was going to multiply and replenish, but I couldn't check that box. I couldn't get married in the temple, and I couldn't like make babies in a fun way, I guess. I don't know. But it challenged what life was supposed to look like for me.
And you also talked about deciding to just not date.
Yeah.
And becoming the saddest you ever were in your life.
I was
because
like, maybe that's my lot.
Because that means shutting yourself off to intimacy.
Yes.
Not just sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, all that, right?
Everything. And there was always this thing too where like my whole life, like I'm a fun person. We like fun. I have fun and stuff. And BYU really helped me come out of my shell with like connecting with people. I transitioned from that shy Stacey to like finally being less afraid to put myself out there and people liking who I was. And I was like, whoa. But like there was always something keeping me from connecting deeper with people. And obviously looking back in retrospect, it's because like this huge aspect of who I am was being completely locked away and shoved away. This thing that I had always identified as this disgusting monster at the time felt small and locked away. And now it just bust out of its cage and it was big and it was scary. And at this point I started talking to bishops and leadership. I was like, hey, listen, this thing isn't going away. I feel like I'm made this way. This thing isn't going away. What do I do? And they're like, marry a woman. And I'm like, wrong. Wrong, sir.
What year was this?
This had to be, so around this time, a little before, after that last girl I dated, I was in a sketch comedy group called Divine Comedy. And it had just transitioned into this thing called Studio C. So probably 2012. So Studio C was just starting to pick up, right? I am just like all of a sudden Mormon parents are pulling me aside and they're like, we love what you're doing. We want our kids to be like you. I want my son to be like you. I want my daughter to marry a guy like you. And I'd be like, well, funny story. But they were just like, we love what you're doing. And we did a whole like youth face-to-face thing with the church where we spoke to like all the church of the world about like, cause kids were like, oh, you're not in your 70s and you're like the church like supports what you're doing. Like this is a unique place to have people.
And just to give a little bit of context to the listeners about what was going on during 2011, 2012 with what the church, I mean, at this point, the church is changing rapidly and like fast paced about their teachings about homosexuals and what they think and how they're going to handle them. 2011, 2012 is when Evergreen, this big organization that was, popular among same-sex attracted Mormons for several years, is kind of giving its last breath of hope and trying to, they're almost about to close because the church has completely withdraw their support.
And Evergreen supported overtly conversion therapy through both psychotherapy and weekend retreat support groups.
Wow.
That was Evergreen, and it was a huge deal. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so the church takes away the support, the financial, and just, I mean, they're used to give them buildings for their meetings and that kind of stuff. So Evergreen kind of disappears around 2012. And then North Star surfaces
with Ty Mansfield.
With Ty Mansfield, and who works at BYU as a teacher in the psychology department, I think.
He's a queer professor at BYU.
He's
married
mixed
to
orientation marriage. Yeah.
When I hear that, my only hope is and I'm not here to be like, do this. I'm just like, I hope you're both happy. I hope and pray.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't. I'm not praying about it. I'm gonna be honest. But I don't know them. But I just hope when I hear that, I'm like, my heart goes out. I hope you're happy.
Yeah.
And that's between you and whatever.
Totally.
But this is kind of when they're racing to, now we're going from conversion therapy to this mixed orientation marriage, but then also getting away from that. It was just this weird years, right?
Yeah, they start shifting their message away from being gay as a choice, away from the solution is to be celibate or enter into, from explicitly advocating celibacy and mixed orientation marriage as the solution. They would still find it, they still to this day are finding indirect ways to promote those options.
Interesting.
But they realized, I think, because of research that was coming out, that there was a huge legal liability for supporting conversion therapy overtly, and so many mixed orientation marriages were blowing up, like Josh and Lolly Weed, for example, where I
remember reading some of his things that were like, we can make it work, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll try.
Yeah, and then the Mormon Gay and Mormon or Mormon and Gay website came out soon after, right?
Yeah. So it's surprising and not, that bishops are still really strongly recommending you to marry a woman. When by then we already had the quote by Gordon B. Hinckley saying, that's not the solution. Marriage is not the solution to same-sex attraction.
But let's be honest, church doctrine, teachings, beliefs don't always flow like that.
Right.
It's not like one person says one thing and all of a sudden everyone's on the same page. No. It's like Meemaw Jenkins who's like, don't marry a Negro or whatever,
Yeah.
It's like people still believe those things even though they've been condemned for
decades.
And so I had bishops that were like, one of the last bishops I came out to was like, hey, there are ways to change that, and I was like, that's I never honestly, and at this point, I have no idea what's happening in the queer LDS space at all. Yeah. I am just trying to figure out why my whole foundation exploded and how I'm going to grapple with just life. So I don't even know what's happening.
That's very interesting. You weren't plugged in all that.
Not at all. No one knew I was queer. No one knew I was gay. I barely knew I was gay. Maybe some select religious leaders, but no one really knew, and I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
So
So as you're in the lowest, most sad part of your life, being elevated as a role model, but knowing inside the Mormon plan had no place for you, how did you navigate that?
It was more so let me think about what that meant for me was, it was I literally, I remember telling, because I met with a bishop and then I met with stake presidents, because I've always been really open about my experiences and I've never wanted to be hide. And I'm like, if it's scary, I'm going to face it. So I'd meet with stake presidents and I'm like, yo, what's going on? What do I do in this situation? I'm really trying I'm trying my best to grapple. I'm trying my best to make sense of this, but this clearly doesn't consider me at all. And they would the best meetings I had with people were the ones where they were like, dude, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm gonna be honest.
Wow.
And the worst were the ones where it was like, you gotta marry a woman. You gotta try a girl out. And I'd be like, I'm gonna say no on that one. Like, thankfully I had that established basket of things that I was like, and nope.
Yeah, meaning sex with a woman would fix you.
And that's what I assumed they meant.
Yeah.
And by all the eye winking and nudging, I was like, okay, nah. But once again, I do want to say that this is like a really, really, this man I'm talking to that recommended that, not a bad guy.
Oh, no.
Not a manipulative individual. This is someone trying the best with what they have. And that's my motto, is like, the world is full of good people trying the best with what they have. Sometimes they don't have a lot. They don't have the resources. And I remember at that point being like, he knows less about this than I do. So I should probably take this into my own hands. And it came to a point where many bishops...
Isn't that frustrating that you don't know where to go, like to find the answers on what to do?
Well, if anything, it was less of like, for me, I guess at this point, I'm starting to really come to terms with the fact that this isn't going anywhere. And I start thinking at this point where I'm like, if this isn't going anywhere, what does that mean about what I've defined this? If this little monster that I've deemed a monster is actually just a part of me, what does that mean about, like, maybe I've been thinking about this the wrong way. And I start, so I have this concept, right, where I feel like authenticity comes into two parts. Part one is getting to know yourself. So like, before you can be who you are, you got to find out who that person is. And so you got to learn like, well, who you are. And maybe in some cases, if you grow up in a place where other people have dictated a lot of your decisions, that's like starting at ground zero. Like, what do you like to even eat? What kind of content do you like to watch? And then the other aspect is being transparent. So like living externally in a way that reflects your inside. And I feel like when those are off, you experience a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of discomfort. And I was experiencing a lot of discomfort. And so I think I was like, okay, I need to find out who I am, and then I need to live in a way that reflects that so I can be congruent with myself, okay? So I can be authentic with me, because I feel like authenticity just, it rings as true to me as a true principle. There's no convincing I need that it's good or bad. I know where that fits. And so I remember in church lessons, I'd be like teaching lessons in elders quorum and being like, hey, some of us are not going to get married. And people were like, what? And I'd be like, it's the truth. Like, just look at it. Like, let's be real about it. Or I remember talking in church about masturbating once. I was like, hey, we struggle. And people were like, and I was like, this is a part of authenticity for me. This is me being real to who I am. And and not this like, my biggest struggle is eating too many brownies. I was like, man, that's not, I hate when people talk about that stuff. I'm like, that's not a real struggle. That's not, I mean, we are live different lives if that's what you're fighting. There was a general conference talk a while ago where, she was so sweet too, but she talked about how she ate too many cinnamon rolls and felt so bad and distance from the Lord. And I remember being like, that is a good Friday night for me. Like, I was like, sin, that's a good time. I was like, we are not the same. But I get it. Part of it is like, you don't want, like, letting people see those parts of yourself is scary, especially when it means you can lose respect or community. But I was at the point where I was like, fighting for respect and community wasn't helping me be happy. So I needed to get on the same page, which is why I was having all these conversations, trying to learn. So it was less about where do I go and more about like, I need to get the information right for me. And so I was gathering data.
So why not come out and tell people about your struggles and
at that, because I didn't even
write
know,
a book and
I didn't even know well, at that point, I didn't even know what that was still. So I was like, it's like a doctor being like, this patient has something I don't understand, and like writing a book about it. It's like, you don't even know it yet. But I did get to a point where I one night was at like a lowest of a low, and I felt like I couldn't go on anymore like this. I felt like I was going to implode. I was like, something needs to change. And that's another strong belief I have, and this might be a fitness thing, where it's like, pain is your body, with your body, your soul telling you something needs to change. You touch a hot stove, it's hot. That's your body being like, get your hand off the stove. And I was experiencing pain, and I was like, okay, This isn't like the pain that just goes away. I'm still feeling it after years. My foundation's a mess. This monster's raging and I'm falling apart. I'm like, I feel like at this point, if you go back to that little analogy of the buried monster who explodes out, I'm like hiding in the bathroom, holding a broom, wearing like a bowl on my head, and it's like fighting to get in the bathroom. And I'm like, it's the last stretch. I don't know what to do. It's all about to fall apart right now. I'm gonna die. And I do what I've always done to find comfort. And I get on my hands and knees. I get on my knees and I pray. And I'm just like, God, I need something now. Like, this is no longer a negotiation. This isn't me asking. Like, I have done my utmost to give myself to you in every way. I need something right now. And I remember specifically being like, do I leave the church and live a gay life? Okay. Or do I stay in church and just forsake that part of myself? And I'm unhappy, but that's what you want. I need to know. And honestly, y'all, I had like a really good experience with it. I felt just like peaceful. I felt so peaceful. And I, for the first time in my life, felt like that little monster that was raging in the house wasn't this thing trying to kill me. It was this thing trying to connect back with me. I felt like for the first time, it was almost like I had this moment where it was like be it God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, was like, you're fighting you. I made you this. You're not changing. You're fighting it. So maybe you should stop fighting it. And I was just like, oh my. And it really like changed the game for me. Yeah. And I think I was doing a lot of research building up to that too. So I feel like there's like a lot of things that went into play. But as of that moment, I felt like who I was divinely supported, and be that queer, be that black, be that a short king under 5'6", you know what I'm saying? Like all those identities were like a huge part of me. And so I should stop fighting them and should maybe try to connect with them. And it was like very iconic. If it was like, you know, we're back in that scenario, the monster's breaking into the bathroom. I felt like I just opened the door and let the monster in and realized it never wanted to hurt me. It was trying to save me this whole time. It was trying to help me be happy. And it like literally changed the game. Like I started coming out to people like immediately. Like my sister, I came out to my younger sister and she was like, yes, finally you're not the perfect child anymore. But like, it was like immediately supported. My sisters, my family, my mom had a hard time, but I was like, at this point, I was like, Ma, listen, that's between you and your therapist. I know where I'm going. So like, you do your thing. Good luck.
Were they asking you, what's your plan? What are you going to do about it?
My mom was just like, my mom was very, very, very active. She was just like, hey, listen, what did she say? She was like, I called her and she was like, I will always love you and support you. Okay. But you can't bring all that stuff in my house. And I was like, hey, listen, I respect it. That's your home. That's your rules. I probably will never be to your house then. And she was like, what? And I was like, Ma, you can't expect me to leave 25% of myself at your door when I come to your house. I have been denying myself for too long, and I'm not going back in the closet for anyone. So I respect your rules. You do your thing, but I'm going to do my thing. So if that's how you feel, that's great. You know, no, not that's great, but like, I respect that, but I probably won't see you for a while. And I was, once I know something, people that know me, they're like, I like hold firm to it, which may be a good Mormon. But my mom called me back later and she was like, oh my gosh, you were right. I was wrong. Like, I'll make the bouquet at the wedding. Because when I came out to my family, I was like, I don't want you to just be like, Stacey's gay. I want you to know what that means for me. Because I was like, hey, Mom, I'm gay. I'm going to start dating men. And I will marry a man. So are you coming to the wedding? And she was like, whoa. Wow. And I was like, I know it's a lot. Take your time. But I just wanted them to know what that meant in my life. Right. It wasn't like, I'm gay, but I'm going to like do my best to like do what you want. No, I was like, this is what it means. So take the time you need. We can have as many conversations as you want. But I came out pretty quickly. Once that happened in 2018, I just was like coming out to everybody. And then I came out publicly in 2018 and like December, I believe, because I wanted to come out before I went back home to Texas for Christmas and just like faced everyone, doing the hard, scary thing. And it was one of the best things for me. Like the immediate shift of like my mood, my mindset, even just like how I felt with myself. Like I'm getting better at getting to know myself and living in a way that was authentic to me. There were like these habits. Like I was like And like back in my Studio C days, I was a little bit thicker around the waist, which is cool. But I didn't realize until I came out that I was like turning to food to stifle my loneliness. And then I came out and started dating guys. And I remember eating dinner and being like, I'm full. And I was like, I've never felt this. It just like all these things started like working out for me. Like I finally stopped fighting myself. And I think this applies in more cases than just sexuality. I had people reaching out to me and they were like, I don't want to have kids, but everyone's telling me I should have kids. And you coming out gave me courage to stand firm in what I believe. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. But like, kudos to you. Or someone reached out and they were like, my mom died. And everyone, I feel like I'm not allowed to mourn her for some reason. It's like, I shouldn't be there. But like you coming out gave me courage to mourn my mother. And I was like, okay, cool. But the thing is, I think like game recognizes game. Like authenticity allows other people to be authentic in whatever way that looks like for them. It just gives them permission to shine in their own way. Yeah. I feel like I'm rambling a lot.
No, you're not.
That's good.
No, it's called gold is what that was. Okay. So you mentioned 2018 is when you came out. I have a couple questions.
Please.
Maybe going a tiny bit back in the timeline. I want to talk about two things. Number one, do you remember the exclusion policy that came out in 2015?
I do.
3 years before you came out, where, for those who have never been Mormon, where the Mormon Church, in response to same-sex marriage being legalized across the entire United States, created what we now call the exclusion policy, which was that any same-sex married couple would automatically be excommunicated from the church, and any children, if either parent was in a same-sex marriage, would not be allowed to be baptized until they're 18 and denounced their parents' marriage. That was the November 2015 exclusion policy. Was Studio C already going by 2015?
Yeah, 2015 we were in full swing.
So talk about what the 2015 policy was like. Then I want to back up and talk about what it's like to start becoming a super popular social media phenomenon within Mormonism, knowing internally that you were a closeted gay man. But start with the exclusion policy.
So with the exclusion policy, I remember at this point, I haven't thought about this in years. I had this group of friends in like one of my church groups, one of my wards, and we would get together and just like have discussions. Because sometimes we felt like church we couldn't really like get into the nitty gritty. We wanted to be like, give support about life. We want to talk about individuals and be like, let's give each other support and just like kick it. I love going deep. I'm the kind of person who's like, people walk up to me sometimes, like at like different places I teach at. And especially when they find out I'm gay, they'll be like, they just feel like I've like opened up to them. And I don't know if you get that. And they'll just like drop something intense. And I love it. One lady was like, found out I was gay and she was like, my brother died. And I was like, tell me more. Like, give me let's go. So I have this group with my friends and we have this conversation and someone brings up the exclusion policy. And I was unfamiliar with everything. I was in the closet at this time. But it was crazy because we all were just trying to figure out how that was like Christ-like. We were all like trying to figure out like why? And like we were going about it in like a pretty respectful way to the church, but we were just like trying to figure out why, you know? And I don't remember coming to a good conclusion. I think that might have been one of those things where I was like, doesn't make sense, you know? I just put in that basket of like, people are trying their best with what they have and they don't have a lot, making mistakes, you know?
Yeah. Well, but Russell M. Nelson did go to, I mean, I guess not Provo, but he went to BYU Hawaii to say that this was revelation directly from God.
It sounds like Stacey was just not plugged in.
I wasn't, but like, I mean, like, I hate to be that guy, but like, I feel like it gets really tricky to know what is, especially when it's like, when are they wearing their I'm a man hat? And when are they wearing their this is revelation hat?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's always, we only find out in retrospect, right?
Right.
So it's always like, well, I guess maybe we have the responsibility to take that information
but that's
and to
why
dissect it ourselves.
It was such a big deal because they usually don't tell us. But they did tell us that was revelation.
They also had revelation that like black people should hold the priesthood after not having black people hold the priesthood. Yeah. So I think I was just like, okay, you do your thing. I have this thing where I was like, listen, if an all-powerful God wants me to know and believe something, I believe he'll help me do it if I'm trying my best. And if he doesn't, then like, why worry about it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd be like, okay, whatever. And if God wants me to know it one day, he'll help me realize it. And if not, then I ain't worrying about it.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes we, like, especially coming from like a LDS background, we like talk about this all-powerful God who can like split oceans and do stuff, and then we like limit him so much where it's like, he won't do that. And I'm like, you play by the rules of your own game. I'm gonna do my own, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I had that concept down where I was like, all right, whatever. Like whatever. Just figure it out. People are trying their best and making mistakes.
Dude, Gerardo, I think Stacey was smarter than us.
I don't know about
for
that.
sure.
I think Stacey grew up in a mixed faith home and had a lot more
Code switching a
flexibility
lot,
when
code
it came
switching
to
a lot, right?
a lot of flexibility when it came to like what was religion and what is like even the idea of perfection. I had a father who would drink and smoke and was one of the best people I know. So like when people would be like, caffeine is bad or coffee's bad, I'd be like, I didn't drink coffee, but I never looked at my dad and was like, Dad's dropping the ball. I was like, if I could be half the man that human is, then I will be doing it right, you know? So I'm like,
You learned flexibility
maybe that's what it was.
in your upbringing.
It's like this concept that like whenever there is this black and white in like any teaching at all, I automatically, my brain like raises a red flag where it's like, it's just life isn't like that. Like it's never all black and white. What works for one person will not work for someone else. Yeah. We say killing is wrong and you could be disfellowship for killing, but we like celebrate scriptures that celebrate someone murdering someone. And not to say that that's good or bad. It's just like, there's just nuance in all things, right? And so I'm like, I think it's okay to embrace the nuance and to, if that's the case, like take the responsibility into your own hands to find out what resonates with you and what doesn't. Oh.
Love it. So the 2015 policy didn't hit you very hard, it sounds like.
Like I remember discussing it and being like, I don't really love this. But I never felt like the church had a good like relationship with the queer community ever. So I don't know if I was ever surprised or even just like in that space enough to really
understand what
be
was going
concerned
on.
or grapple with it.
You're like, that's on brand.
I was like, hey, listen, at least they're consistent. No, but I don't remember being like too in turmoil or disarray, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the building pressure of Studio C's fame juxtaposed with your closeted gayness as a Mormon and worrying about those two things coming to a head at some point or blowing up? Or did you just compartmentalize all the way up until 2018 when you came out and it exploded?
I always talk about building up to 2018 as like, it was like a lot of people, especially in the queer community, have this, it's almost like this chance to like start to experiment a little bit, like try things that they're like, I don't know if I'm gay. Let me spend time with a boy I have a crush with. Let me hold a hand. Kiss a guy, right? And I didn't feel like I had that freedom or flexibility because I felt like I would walk out in public and people would like, oh my gosh, I love your show. And like, way to do it, dude. Like, so I didn't feel like I had any privacy outside of my own home. So I feel like a lot of like my transition was very internal. So I feel like I went into this like chrysalis, I went into this cocoon and was just like, turned myself into guts and like rearranged who I am to come out a butterfly. But so when it came to this when it came to like grappling with the building pressure of Studio C, which was fun to be like, people love what we do. So that was good. But what was tough was I was just trying to figure myself out. I never felt like I was being disingenuous because I wasn't.
Right.
I was always like, that was amongst that time is when I'm like sitting down with bishops and I'm like, yo, your boy's gay. What do we do? Or like, or just being like, oh, you know, Bishop, I did this thing. Like, tell me what I need to do what you feel like I need to do to be good or whatever. But, like I was always authentic in it. And I think it'd be really weird, especially at that time. I remember being like, people make mistakes. That's just what we do. That's the whole point of like the theology behind the atonement is that we're flawed. So like, like don't be weird. Just be an imperfect person and do your best. I don't know. But yeah, so I never really felt like, I was like, no, what do I do? Am I being disingenuous? I do remember looking back thinking like, if I would have come to the conclusion I did when I was working for Studio C, I would have come out. Like I would have done it. I would have done the hard thing. I would have faced the fear. It would have been terrifying, because people lose their jobs at BYU TV for being queer. It just is how it is. It shouldn't be the case, but like that stuff happens. I've heard stories, seen examples. BYU TV doesn't exactly celebrate diversity. I think they're trying in different ways to figure out what that means, but it's just like, it's tough. Like you're a network tied to a church that's tied to like a university, and so it's like, whatever. It's complex. But yeah, I just kind of like was working to figure myself out while I was like working and doing my thing. So
did you just sort of suggest that maybe you had some dating experiences while you were doing Studio C and or BYU? Because you talked about repenting to a bishop.
Oh yeah, just for like internet search history or something.
Okay.
Just being like, whoops, slipped up.
Okay, got it.
But it wasn't like that. It wasn't that frivolous. I'd actually be like genuinely like, hey, if I felt bad about it, I'd go talk to someone about it and be like, hey, what do I need to do?
Okay.
And I constantly had to remind myself that like my relationship with the divine, or what I feel like is like, like where I'm trying to go, is not about the person I'm talking to. That's just almost like a show of respect to the process. And so I like once on my mission, I guess I've been this way for a while. Once on my mission, me and this companion had like we just were not vibing. And he like spoke to the mission president about it. He was like, Stacey's like off his rocker. And I thought he was off his rocker, whatever. Two stories to everything, right? Anyways, the mission president's like, hey, what's going on here? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, let me just clarify something really fast with you, mission president. I'm not here for you. I'm here because I believe in what this is. I'm here for God, doing what I feel is right. I'm not here for you. And I say this in all due respect. I just want you to know that like your approval of me is like second to God's and my own. So just letting you know. But that's kind of like a style I've had. So I was just like, I know, and I look back and I'm like, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I think he really respected it. I said it in a respectful way. I was like, hey, I'm not here on the mission to get the approval of people or to be liked. I'm just trying to do my best. And that companion everyone's doing the best with what they have. This is a whole nother stories for another time. Later, I found out I was his favorite companion, and I was like, oh my gosh,
wow.
what? Yeah, it was rough. Anyways, but like that mindset is one that I've had, and like whether it's like at BYU TV as Studio C is getting bigger, or talking to religious leaders, it's like, I'm not here for you. I'm not like, man, come on now. Like what? What a waste of life to live it for other people. That's a great way to be unhappy, as I was learning, right? And so I do feel like that was like the final stone in like Thanos' glove was like finally like embracing my sexuality and coming out. And I was like I felt so, man, when you're authentic, when you're not like editing your behavior or yourself for other people, you can focus on the things that matter. I felt like I could be more creative. I wasn't hiding anymore. My relationships with other people grew so much stronger. When I could let people see me, who, you know what I'm talking about? When I could let people see that I was gay, I was addicted to the feeling of like coming out to close friends. And then, because we immediately became closer. Only like one or two people responded a little weird, and they're like over it now. I'm like, whatever. But, all these positives came from it. There's a scripture I always quote that it's by their fruits you shall know them. I can't remember where it is. But the concept is like they're talking about like prophets in the Old Testament or in the New, I don't know. But it's like the concept is if the tree is good, it'll have good fruit. If the prophet is good, the results will be good, right? And I'm like, okay, there are some trees out there that maybe people have told me they're bad and they're bad fruit. But I'm like, I don't know. So a good way to find out if the tree is good, try the fruit. And so I'm at this point, I'm like trying the fruit of this tree, this thing that I've always thought was wrong. And I'm like, this is amazing. I'm feeling better about myself. I'm able to give more to relationships and people around me. And I'm able to like succeed in other ways. I was like, this is a good fruit. And so it forced me to look at like this structure I had lived within. And I was like, I'm living within the confines, these fences that someone else built for me. And they're saying, happiness is in these fences. And I'm experiencing the fact that that's not the case for this really huge primary concept, my sexuality. And so at this point, I think I started analyzing my relationship with the church, where I was like, okay, well, maybe what I need to do is I need to take my beliefs into my own hands. I need to look at all these fences that have been built by someone else, and I need to analyze if those fences make sense for me. And so I felt like in the analogy, I would go and like test the integrity. I'd move the fence and I'd be like, oh, this feels better actually. So I would just like adjusting all my beliefs one by one. I was just tackling something different each like week. I'd be like, what about this? How do I feel about this? And it was really, really cool.
Were you attending church still?
Yeah, probably. I'm trying to think of like, yeah, most likely. I really love I love the community. I love the environment. There was a point where I was starting to feel like so much that was being said, though. I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. And I don't know if that's like, especially when it came to sexuality. And sometimes when it comes to like shame and how we talk about individuals, I hate that. Like this pedestal, like good, bad, right, wrong, me, thriving, succeeding with the truth, them struggling, wishing they knew. And I think that just like removes the opportunity to learn from other people, like who are different. And so I remember at one point, it was probably during the pandemic, when I was like, church is becoming a big burden. It's becoming tough. I go and I don't leave feeling good or edified. And so I was like, let me not go. And I didn't go one Sunday, and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, amazing. The time I had, the sleep was great. I was just like, this is just so good. But I feel like a lot of the things I believe still heavily relate to a lot of my upbringing, but I've kind of just like taken them into my own hands and then adjusted according to what works for me. And so I feel like some people are like, oh, when did you leave the church? And I was like, I don't know if I ever like left. I felt like I just started living life in a way that makes sense for me, doing my own thing. And then I'll like look across the board and be like, oh, we've kind of grown apart a little bit. Like we're kind of in different places. And then I like live my life and do my own thing. And then I look and I'm like, oh, like I feel very, like we're in very different places. And that's not like we're in different places. I'm like looking down. It's just like, hey, that doesn't work for me. And that's okay. And I know there are some people, a lot of people that works really well for. And like, that's okay. Like do what works for you. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So, wow. I think what I just heard is that after you came out in 2018, you stayed in the church for at least a couple more years, which is great.
It's like, honestly, I just don't even know how to define stay in the church.
Continued attending.
Yeah, I would just go. I would go and I would attend, and I was actually pretty involved. Well, as much as I could be. I'm just like very upfront. Before I came out publicly, one of the bishop whose ward I was in, I was like, hey, heads up. First off, I'd never talked to him about anything before that, but I was like, I had like 3 callings in the ward, and I was like, hey, so I'm gay, I'm gonna date, and I just want to give you a heads up. I don't want you to feel like I tricked you or something. Yeah. And his like jaw hit the floor. He was like, he literally said, he was like, but you're so good. And I was like, that's where I got you. No, I was just like, it was actually really important for me to talk to him that up front, you know, the whole like face and thing. Cause I was like, I think it's important for him to see that like, I am like contributing a lot to like the ward and the connection. And I'm not a monster. I'm not like a delinquent of society. I'm not like slinking in the shadows. Like I'm living a pretty like happy, thriving life. But he was so unsure how to handle it. He was like, hey, okay, so, and he was a real straight shooter too, which I appreciate. But he was like, hey, he was like, okay, nothing wrong with being gay. If you act on it, we have to handle it.
What year was this?
This was 2018.
Okay.
That's around that time, right when I came out. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? So like, if I act on being gay, what does that mean? Is that if I kiss a boy, hug a boy, hold hands, maintain eye contact? Like, what does it mean? Because all those feel pretty gay in some front. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, he was like, let me get back to you. And then he went and talked to the stake president and came back and he was like, anything gay. And I was like, all right, what I'm hearing is that maybe we don't know what that is. So I'm going to do my best with what I have and you do the best with what you have. And if you need to like disfellowship me, I was just like, I said, if you need to handle it in any way, I will not fault you for you trying to do the best with what you have. And I would hope that you do the same for me, but it's really not a concern of mine. So I'm going to do my thing. You do your thing. All the respect for you. I know you're trying your best. Good luck.
So you didn't live in fear dating men as a single Mormon man still attending church.
Dude, once I came out, I was like, Dude, if I feel like the divine is on my side, like what man is going to stand in my way? If I feel like the universe, the very nature and essence, and like call it God, the universe, or whatever. If I feel like I'm supported by the powers that be, I'm like, who's going to stand in my way? Like Bishop, who's like, I've never known a gay person's going to be like, no, I'm going to be like, bruh, put you in that basket. Whoops. So I have, and I had this like confidence in who I am and what I'm doing in a way that, like, honestly, if the prophet of the Mormon church sat down and was like, you cannot do this, I'd be like, how are you going to stop me? You're going to show up on a date? You might like it, careful. No, but I mean, just like making light of it. But just the concept, though, is that, like, when I have that, like, support, that when I felt like I had that divine support, and I still believe in God, like, I still have the divine support, I'm like, what man is going to, like, what? Like, if you disagree with me, that's between you and your therapist. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know? And when I came out, I got a lot of pushback. But once again, I was like, all right, Edna from Kansas, I have no idea who you are. And you, while you're trying to do what's right, you don't know me. And so your opinion and your perspective means very little. You know what I mean? It's just like, you just can't.
Yeah.
But if someone was like my best friend was like, hey, this is how I feel, that would be different. Someone who knows me and is more familiar with my situation.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, yeah. But basically, the bishop didn't give you the stamp of approval for you to date.
No. But I did go to a different ward after, and because I just like aged out. Once you turn like 31, you go to a different ward. Because I'm like, I don't run. I'm not running from nobody. I was like, me and Bishop are sitting down. So I went to a new ward eventually, and the bishopric was like, oh, we want to get to know you. And I was like, hey, heads up, I'm gay, I'm dating, and I just want a place where I can worship and figure things out, you know, at my own pace. And they were like, hey, you're in the right place. My kids come to this ward. We need more people. We need more diversity. And I was like, I was ready for a fight. I was ready to be like, I'm gay.
What year was this?
This was in probably 2019.
Okay, so there was a big difference because in 2018, I mean, we have to look at the months, but in 2018, so you know how bishops in the Mormon church, they use this handbook where it kind of gives them all the instructions on how to handle cases, and there's certain sections about homosexuality. So back then in 2018, the handbook still said, like, the language was homosexual behavior. So homosexual behavior was against the doctrine of the church.
And I'm like there sitting was cross-legged, and he's like, no more. Like, oh, my bad.
There was no definition what homosexual behavior was. The only definition was the BYU Honor Code, which actually was pretty explicit. And originally in 2008, or back then in 2018, the Honor Code, it was encompassed anything romantic was homosexual behavior. I think it was pretty explicit, and there was like 3 or 4 sentences explaining exactly what homosexual behavior was. But in 2019, when the church reverses the exclusion policy, they come out with this statement saying, well, now we're going to treat homosexuals the same way we treat heterosexuals in terms of the law of chastity.
Yes, that's true.
And the handbook changes.
Game changer.
And now the homosexual behavior language is removed from the handbook. And now it's very explicit. It's same-sex marriage and anything that's sex outside of marriage.
So I think that ward I was in, there was a handful of queer men, because they were like older, single men in the church. Like, of course they're going to start gathering. Yeah. But I think the bishop in that ward was like, yeah, y'all can date.
Yeah.
Wow. But I was like, my whole thing was just like, I'm not looking for permission.
Right.
So like, I'm not asking if I can. The only thing I'm asking is if I can be like respected, like I can be respected here. And once they were like, and they were really cool about it. They were like, you want a calling? And I was like, yeah, man. And I like did my thing. And I was like, my whole goal though was like figuring out where I was with religion and how I wanted to, I still took a lot of comfort for being in like this space that I had grown up my whole life going to. But it was starting to get really just uncomfortable to be like, oh, I don't agree with this. I don't really agree with this. Or this is kind of weird. I feel like, I'm like, oh my gosh. I really love the human aspect and the community of it, which is beautiful. And I think that's so healthy. But But some of the other things I was having a hard time with, as far as just like knowing, like I'm like, this isn't bringing good into my life. But that ward was just so great. Everyone was so supportive. I feel like the leadership was just like, yeah. And I really lucked out with like my like religious leaders, because I've heard stories that people have had, and oh my gosh, wow. But yeah, they were just like, yeah, do your thing, and
that's good.
let us know.
Being 53 and growing up Mormon, just the idea of a bishop telling a gay man that he can date and saying he's okay with it.
Members of the word.
Like even now, I think most Mormons would say there's no way that could ever happen.
Yeah.
I think it's probably becoming more and more common, but it is kind of mind-blowing to hear that.
It was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And I know I had some friends who were very, they were just like kind of like really sad. Queer friends who were really sad because they were like sacrificing decades of their life to something that just like changed. And it was hard for them to justify, I think, like, because on one end you could be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy it changed. Like, I'm so relieved. But for someone who was like putting like, this is an eternal principle, which is why I must adhere to it. My sacrifice, my suffering is not in vain because this is God's plan. And then to have it switch so fast was like really jarring for them. And my heart went out to them, and I think they're doing well now. But yeah, I was like, oh, that seems tough. You know, I don't envy them.
Yeah. There's kind of this celebrity deference within Mormon culture sometimes. Some examples, I could mention might be, Tyler Glenn. When I was, hanging out with Tyler quite a bit from Neon Trees, he came out as gay. I was told that there was kind of words sent throughout church headquarters, leave Tyler alone, because he's a celebrity. And of course it would be disastrous for the church on Rolling Stone magazine to have like Tyler Glenn write, I was excommunicated for being gay. So they left him alone, right?
Yeah.
People can't see what you just do.
I just tapped my nose of like, I've thought about this where I'm like, I wonder if some of my experience has been from privilege of being well known in these LDS spaces where I'm like I have a platform, and and I'm not like being like, and if you come for me, but I'm like, and if something happened and I was very like open and honest about it, I'm like, it could be kind of messy. I remember thinking about that, but I was like, and like I never ever said to a bishop, like I wasn't like, I dare you, Bring it. Ooh, I'm gonna go on Instagram, do a cute little post about it all. No, but and just the air of authenticity. It's like, listen, my thing is like has always seemed so unhealthy to me. Like you hide the mistakes of others so they don't look bad. It's like, what the? Like, I get in one aspect if you're like, hey, this is family business or something, but it seems really like a great way to perpetuate abuse, to be like, I am going to, it's like this, so I had this friend once growing up, it was like a freshman year, and she had been assaulted by a guy. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'd found out she was in tears, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, let's go talk to someone. And she was like, no. And I was like, why not? And she was like, I don't want to jeopardize his chances of going on a mission. And I was like, the way, and I'm not saying like, I think that's like, I mean, at the end of the day, what I told her, I was like, that is not your responsibility. His actions are his responsibility. And he made that choice, and he can sit with the consequences of that choice, or at least the exposure that comes from that choice is not one for you to protect him from. You are a victim. And I feel like that happens in other spaces sometimes where it's like, this person did this thing, or this corporation or this entity does this thing, and we can't talk about it for fear of making them look bad. It's like, no. If it was done, it was done. Let the truth be the truth. Yeah. And if the consequences are negative, and you know what I mean? It's like, regardless of if it's good or bad, the truth is the truth. And hiding that, I just don't know what that does for people, for individuals. And if anything, I just see problems with that. It's like, if I fire somebody from my company and other people find out, like, I did it, I better own it, right? That's just like part of like sitting with the decisions, and whether it's good or bad, it's like it happened,
Yeah. You just, Mormon Stories has been around 18 years, and we started interviewing gay Mormons in our very first year in 2005. And just to see how so many gay people were either taught to be celibate or taught to get in mixed orientation marriages or taught to do conversion therapy and or excommunicated just for like dating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To see that and that stuff still goes on to this day, but then to see kind of this bishop roulette and or privilege dynamic where now there's a whole generation of people that are given a totally different set of rules. I mean, it's bittersweet because you love the progress, but the injustice. It reminds me of all the black men, frankly, who are in prisons for like selling weed, and now states have legalized in many cases both
People are making millions
medicinal and recreational marijuana. It's like, well, then why did we incarcerate generations of black men over something that now is totally okay? Like the injustice of the difference of people's treatment over time is just it's an ethical, moral problem for me.
Yeah. And I look at this and I think honestly, that's why I got into like the DEI space of like talking about my experiences being queer or black and like straight or, you know, white spaces, is because I feel like I've had a pretty privileged experience growing up, whether it's with race or my sexuality. And so I feel like I have the responsibility to take what I've learned and the lack of trauma I might have experienced in certain ways and to help make our community better for other people. Because honestly, I really am a firm believer that like, we are not surrounded by bad people. We're just surrounded by people that don't have enough resources, that haven't been exposed to differences. And so they don't really know where to put it. And often we come at them like, you know, like I saw this video the other day of a dog seeing someone in a Santa Claus outfit and they attack them because the dog's like scared, right? And I think we do that a lot. You attack something that's unfamiliar. First instinct is to like put a cross up and burn it at the stake. And so hopefully by like sharing my experiences, I can minimize some of the trauma of someone else out there. I don't know. You know what I mean? But yeah, I feel like I've had a pretty... And I think part of that might be, honestly, in other ways, my like perspective or my style. Because if my bishop would have been like, we're going to disfellowship you, I would have been like, do what you got to do, man. And I would have meant it. When I told him, I will respect you doing what you feel is right because I'm trying to do the same. I meant it. I did tell him too, when I came out, I was like, hey, bishop. And I kind of threw him for a loop, but I was like, I kind of feel like I understand more of what Joseph Smith went through when he prayed for something and got an answer that no one else really supported him in. And I specifically used that example because I was like, I want you to know that like, I've really thought about this. This is the experience I had. And he was so like, he was like, hold on. Oh, wait. I was like, Joseph Smith's loved ones were like, hey, man, don't do it. His religious leaders told him not to do it or whatever. And I was like, I kind of get that dynamic now. And I don't think he loved that, but I was like, that's true. That's how I feel.
I love that.
That's what it is for me. I think people should just be, honestly, like if my platform is like, work to be authentic and then like learn who you are and then live in a way that reflects that. And I don't know, I just think nuance, even if it's like in our beliefs, we see it a lot nowadays where it's like in LDS spaces, there are a lot more nuanced ways people are approaching that. And there might be concerns from people that are like, how can you do halfway or how can you, but whatever. But I'm like, I think everyone's happier if you just let yourself be more nuanced. If you let yourself do what works for you. And then if it doesn't, analyze why and make a change. You know what I mean? Like,
I love it. So when you know, Charlie Bird or Ben Schlatti come to mind. I don't know if those names mean anything to you.
I love Charlie and Ben.
Yeah. Like there is a mind, or even Tom Christopherson, there's a mindset that I respect, which is, look, obviously the church has a long way to go with respect to many things, including the LGBT experience, but we're going to be able to make a bigger impact if we stay in it and try to change it from within, even if it's hard. You've already sort of said that at some point it started to get uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
But what if you had to try and speculate as to what made it so you didn't want to make that choice when other people like Charlie or Ben or Tom have decided to make that choice? Do you know what that would be?
I remember specifically saying to myself, I was like, I'm going to carve a space out for people like me. It was hard. It was like, man, I gotta first get a space myself. I felt like I was like, you see those, like, what is it, salmon swimming upstream and they eventually just die?
Oh,
I was like,
haven't seen that. Is that what happens?
But it's like they swim upstream to like spawn, right? And they're like fighting against the very elements of nature, water flowing in the opposite direction. And they know the extent of well, I don't know. I'm assuming these salmon know, but they swim to this point where they finally spawn and then they just die from exhaustion, right? And I felt like that at a certain point where I was like, okay, I think it's good to have, I think it's actually really noble to suffer on behalf of the whole, especially if you're making something happen. Like, look at our women's suffrage and civil rights. Like, we don't look at Martin Luther King and we're like, what a crazy guy for trying. Like, we look at him and we're like, what a hero for doing what, like, other people couldn't do. Even though it was very collaborative, of course. But I think of those examples and I was like, I had to take account of my own health at a second and be like, okay, what am I doing this for? How do I feel? And make an assessment. And so now I think of like social civil rights work in general about this, where it's like WWF wrestling. Tap in, do your thing. When you're tired, tap out. Tap out. If you want to tap back in, tap in, do your thing, tap out. Just like respect your what you can give. And so when I look at people like Ben and Charlie and Tom Christofferson, I am first off just like blown away at the emotional reserves. And I'm always concerned when I meet these guys. I'm like, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? Do we need to tap out? Are we doing fine? And they're always like, chill. But I'm just like blown away at that space. And I hope for anyone who might be feeling that way, that they're taking account of themselves too, that they're just making sure that they're like not only worried about the health of like an institution that means a lot to them, but they're also worried about their own health and their future and what that looks like. And they're adults. They can figure that out, and they're doing their best. And I am very blown away at the impact that these people have had. Because while some people can look at them and be like, they're not living in the way that I think they should live, it's like, look at all they've done. Look at like the people they've reached that I will never be able to reach. You know what I mean? The hearts that they've softened. And maybe you can say, but the doctrine hasn't changed. And you'd be wrong because it just changes all the time. But at one end though, it's just like, it just depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to help some parent be a little more supportive to their queer kid in a way that their queer kid doesn't want to kill themselves, then like mission accomplished. If your goal is to get like this dude in his 80s to change church policy or something, maybe that it's not happening. But I think it just depends on your goal, you know?
Or to get bishops to be more compassionate with the people they serve, right?
Yeah, which I've had some, honestly, and so you remember the ward I was in where the bishop was like, hey, do your thing. Ben Shalati was in that ward. And I 100% give credit to Ben being his authentic self and sharing his experiences, to making my experience be one where I could figure out faith in a way that didn't leave me freaking traumatized, right? Yeah. That I could just be like, softly be like, oh, this doesn't work for me. I wish you the best. And like float away, versus being like, feeling like I'm getting like attacked and burned at the stake. Like, wow. I don't know.
Yeah. I love it. Love it. Okay, so much fun, so much good here. So there are going to be a lot of like Studio C super fans that would want to just hear behind the scenes of like,
oh, interesting,
totally just as a cultural pop influence, as a comedic. It was kind of a comedic experiment, but from the Mormon Church and from BYU,
very experimental,
right?
Very.
So like, if we want to shift gears, and I want to come back to kind of your what do we call it? Growth and healing and growth, kind of the reconstruction. I want to come back to your own reconstruction.
I like that.
And focus on like what's dating been like for you, and growth, and even the divine and beliefs and all that stuff. I want to come back to that. Were you?
Nope.
Okay.
I should talk about my like Studio C crew.
Let's do it.
Because they were like, we have been working together. We were in Divine Comedy in college together since 2011. We've been working together for like over a decade. Holy cow. And some people longer with each other. And when I came out, we had started our own company. And a lot of the people that were like following us, that fans of this, were people that were like fans of us at Studio C, LDS, families. And at one point I pulled aside my coworkers and I was like, hey, I'm going to come out publicly. This could really hurt our company. I was like, I'm just being straight up. I did marketing and PR for the company. I was like, I'm going to be straight up. This could really hurt our company. And I think it might be good. And someone stopped me immediately. We're having this like company meeting and they were like, if they don't want you, we don't want them. They was like, you're like, we want you to show up and be yourself. We don't want you to stifle it for anyone. If people have a problem with you, they have a problem with us. And I was like, oh. And that was the only conversation we needed. They're like my biggest supporters. They're probably some of the reason too, like my reconstruction has been where it is. They've always been so supportive and so loving and encouraging. The first date I went on, they were like, one of the guys was like, I don't like him. And I was like, why? And he was like, he was late and you deserve better. It was just like, they were just like with me. They're on Tinder swiping with me through guys, right? Like they're in it with me. It was never like this like, well, we love and accept you, but like our kids, what do we tell them? Like they were just like in it with me.
Or like love the sinner, hate the sin. Even.
Oh, but let's just call that the garbage it is right now. I'm sorry. Like if that's something that even when in my most active days, I was like, let's analyze this. Like, right? When you say love the sinner, hate the sin, and what you define as a sin is a part of who I am, you're saying love you, hate you. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're like, stop that garbage right now. Jesus never said that. I don't know who did say that, but they probably, I don't know if they're around anymore. But that feels like, honestly, like to me, it feels like a workaround and like love one another, where it's like, I love you, but I kind of hate you. Mm-hmm. Like it feels like it's a workaround. Love the sinner and get out of here. Like, what is that? Like, if you're going to love me, love me. When people say that too, they'll be like, I love you, but I got to say it. I'm like, girl, listen. We met 10 minutes ago. You don't love me. I think it's cute that you say that, but I don't know what that means to you, but I don't think we're on the same page. So I've had people that are like, will be in my DMs and they're like, listen, I love you, but I have to tell you how wrong you are. And I'll be like, let's clarify something real fast, Clarabelle. I've never met you. I don't know who you are. So when you say you love me, I might need more context on what that how you define that. But for me, that's someone who's like shows support in my life, and I've never met you before. So we're going to throw that out the window. Second, blocked. I block people like it's my birthday. No, but half the time when people reach out, most of the time I try to be very sincere. So if it's like, how dare you? And I'm like, hey, let's talk about it if you want. And then if they're just like coming and roasting, if people comment on things in a way that I'm like, another queer kid might see this and want to kill themselves, I'm like, block, I don't play. When it comes to other people, I'm like, block, bye. We don't do that. We're not doing it.
Sense. Love it. Any stories you want to tell about like the most famous skits or like the growth of the popularity of Studio C, the role that it had, the personalities you worked with, or maybe that's its own, maybe we can bring a couple other cast members and have that be its own episode. But is there anything as a part of your story you would want to share?
That was very instrumental in my like finding out what authenticity meant, because it did provide, like, all of a sudden I'm fighting harder to be myself when everyone is now like it's the thing about like celebrities. That's so weird because I'm like, I ain't a celebrity. I'm well known in Utah, but the thing about that is like you construct someone in your mind of who they are, and you don't know them. You're like identifying their brand, and then you impose like that onto them as like a human being. You're like, this is everything they are. And it's like, you don't know me. And so I have to constantly remind people and myself that even if it's praise or if it's insults, I'm like, they do not know you. They do not know you. Mm-hmm. They know a brand. They know a presentation. Yeah. They know maybe even a veneer, whatever. They know a snippet, and they think they know you. They do not know you, right? So if someone's like, "You're amazing. You're the greatest thing," it's like, "I'm so sorry, but you don't know me." But I think that balance is important. But anyways,
how did you go from a shy kid from Texas to in one of the most popular creative productions of BYU ever?
Wow. It's honestly, looking at that transition from, so I changed schools my senior year. because I wanted to prep for my mission. Lost all my friends, my little group of friends, because I was a little shy Stacey. People would say, like, talk to me, and I would just start sweating. I was just so uncomfortable engaging with human beings. And I honestly, it's like working out. Everything's like working out. It's like fitness where what happens is you like lift, you like put your muscles under strain to the point where they literally have to grow to accommodate. So you give a heavy weight and your body's like wrecked. And it's like, if I want to handle this, I got to get stronger. And so they get stronger through the struggle. That high school year was so freaking uncomfortable. I got to a point where I was like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I can't continue in this space like this. I need to reclaim me. And so this whole trajectory of like authenticity started then. It was me trying to identify who I was and live in a way. And maybe in high school, it was simple. It was like, I'm going to dress how I want. I would stand in front of the mirror for hours and be like, what are people going to think is cool? And I was like, forget that. I was like, I'm going to dress like I started pushing up against that by wearing weird stuff, which doesn't feel very like it feels like a high schooler would do that. But I would be like wearing soccer socks and I was like trying to just like confront that like push to conform. And it carried through going to like through BYU, meeting people and going on a mission and coming back and like culminated through Studio C. And because I'm gonna tell y'all right now, the whole attention getting thing is not like always like grass is greener. I think some people, when people say they want to be famous, I'm like, gag. That like even just that phrase is weird. It's one thing to be known for the work you do, but to just have attention, you lose privacy and you get treated like an object all the time. I had people who would they don't see a person, they see this brand and they want to and it's really dehumanizing sometimes. But
they want favors and
or just like people, I'm trying to think, it's like they come up to you and they just want things from you. And that's not always everyone, but it just feels like it's just like people just pulling you. They just want more of you. And you have to get really good at setting boundaries. Like there's times when people will come up for a picture and I'll be like, sorry, I'm not feeling it today. And they'll be like, you're a jerk. And I'd be like, I don't know you. Bye. Like, I don't why your opinion can't mean much to me because I have to protect me. It's the same thing with like religion where it's like, you have to protect you, right? You have the responsibility to do the best for you. But to answer your question about Studio C,
did you switch to acting in your undergrad?
I literally studied. I was going to go into law school to be a lawyer. Was studying PR. I auditioned for Studio C to support a friend, or for Divine Comedy. He was like, I wanted to audition for this college thing. And I was like, good, I'll go. And he was like, I want you to do it with me. And I was like, okay.
So before then you didn't have any comedy or acting experience?
No.
What?
I literally did it to support a friend.
What?
And he didn't make it in. To this day, Dustin, he's like, we talk about it because he's like, oh yeah, I got you there. But I just was like, okay, this is fun. I'll do it until I can't, until law focuses take me away. But then it became a show called Studio C, and I was like, well, no, I'm getting a little bit of money from it. This is kind of cool.
Oh, they paid you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a job. Not well in the beginning. I was getting paid.
15.
I was getting paid like student wages.
Oh, really?
Because I was a student, and so they were like, they love a good workaround. But I was getting paid nothing. But the fact that I was getting paid to do something that fun was like, I was like, this is amazing. Like what? Like working with my good friends, doing this goofy thing. Like what? And so that started growing. And then what happened with Studio C was we were all so surprised it even took off. The most popular show on BYU TV before us was Fawns and Porter's Quilting. with a viewership of 2,000 people a week.
How big did Studio C get?
Studio C's viewership was we were getting like 100,000 views in like 2 days, So, I mean, it was eventually.
YouTube.
But when we started, we were on the same channel. We were sharing channel space with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. So it'd be like on YouTube, it was like Mormon Tabernacle, Amazing Grace, and a sketch. And eventually, it was like years later, they eventually took off the Amazing Grace video because it had like millions of views. Like people loved it. But they were like, this should be a Studio C channel. So it's starting to grow amongst the LDS population. And then we did a sketch called Scott Sterling, which we were like, we didn't think anything of it. You never know it's going to go viral. And it went viral. It was about this goalie. They're doing a penalty kick shootout in soccer. This goalie's in the goal. He keeps getting hit in the face. And no matter what he's doing or where he's going, he keeps getting nailed in the face. And it's like a simple concept. We weren't expecting too much, but people were like, it just like went big. ESPN picked it up. Shaq tweeted about it or something. Like all of a sudden we were getting like attention. In Bosnia, they reported that Scott Sterling died because they thought it was real. Like it was just like, what? And then Studio C kind of started exploding beyond like the LDS community. Heavily LDS, but all of a sudden random people were finding us. Conan O'Brien was a fan of our sketches, which we were like, what?
Yeah.
We had a chance to perform with Keenan from SNL, who's like the longest running member, which was
how? What was that?
wild.
Wait, tell that story.
It was honestly our last Studio C show. We did it in New York, and Keenan came on as a guest, and he's like a really nice guy. He got us all like tickets to go to SNL. We were like backstage and watching SNL. We were like, this is crazy. We're like, we love sketch comedy is what we do. So we're like, this is wild. We're like, what? But it's just like we had a lot of really, really cool opportunities. And people sometimes will say, they're like, how dare you ride the lapels of the church's coat and then turn your back on the church? How dare you? And I get how people can feel like that. But the thing is, like, could you imagine how damaging that would be to if I would have like been dishonest with myself about my views and my beliefs to make something feel good or look good? Like, that's not going to help anybody. That's just going to hurt people. And I hope people know that, like, we are human beings who have beliefs and feelings, and we're trying to figure life out. And so as we navigate this, maybe don't think of us as like these like money hungry, like, oh, we're gonna make a sketch show for Jesus and then turn our back on Jesus. like we're just people trying to figure life out. And so where you feel like there might have been some strategic play, we're literally just trying to just figure out life. You know what I mean? We're just doing our best with what we have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I might look back one day and be like, dang it, Stacey, that wasn't right. And I will course correct. Or I might look back and be like, I don't know, you just never know what the future holds. So like, let's give each other some grace and patience. We're doing our best. I feel like that when people sometimes look at people in the church and they're like, how dare you? And I'm like, first off, I'm always like, we were all there. Like, come on. If like we were there, like if you could just have some grace for people. And second, people have different experiences and they're doing their best with what they have, as we are. Yeah. And just because we're living in a different way doesn't mean we have the answers, and vice versa. We're just trying our best, I'll have Julia include this in the show notes. Maybe can you think of 3 skits you were in that were some of your favorites, or were some of the ones that were biggest? Are Studio C videos still available? They're still on YouTube.
Okay.
I was literally just thinking about that because I was going through and I was like, I think there were some sketches where you could see, I wrote that the gays like kind of leaking out a little bit. Let's see. Oh man, that's tough. There's so many. Oh, there was one I wrote called Sassy Secretaries, where I think that's what they called it. They name it something else sometimes. And it's just me and Natalie being these like super passive aggressive sassy secretaries. And I was just a good time. It's just fun, right?
Yeah.
Like goofing off with your friends. There's another one I wrote called it's like the PDA cop. It's this cop that's super anti-PDA. I think that was like closeted Stacey coming out, where it's like, if I can't hold hands, no one can. But that was just a good time. That was fun. Let's see. What's one more? Oh my gosh.
Are there some you're most known for when people see you?
Let's see. Maybe some of the most known for would be like the crayon sketch, where all the crayons are like singing and the black crayon's like super depressed. The black color crayon, I was the brown crayon. Okay, just so we make sure we distinguish. I think it's like a fun stinger at the end, because my friend wrote it and he was like, what do you think of this? And I was like, I love it. Because at the very end I walk in and I'm like, coming in as the skin color crayon, and the crayon is not the same color as my skin. And I'm like, can we just point this out? We were surprised BYU TV let us get away with that one. Yeah, we were like, the commentary though of like skin color crayon is only one color. Like, what? Gross. I think that might be one of the bigger ones I'd pop in. But there's a lot of, there's like over 1,000.
Yeah.
And they're all just stupid. Like they're all just like goofy, like just having a good time with my buddies.
Were there any that were controversial or that had to be taken down?
Oh yeah. We've been making comedy for 10 years, and comedy, not everything ages well, you know? And that's another thing too, is like, once again, we have this tendency to like dig up something from 10 years ago and being like, look how disgusting this person is. And it's like, listen, if we all, can you imagine
like
having
Chris
social
Rock
media?
or
Especially if it's like old, you know? But can you imagine having social media as a teen?
Oh, yeah.
And like people being able to find what John or Stacy thought in like
80s?
high school?
In the
Oh my
80s?
gosh. Yeah, I'm like, we would all be canceled.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, just for grace. We did one where, I shouldn't say this. We did one called, this was one. We did one called Putin on the Ritz, and it's like Vladimir Putin's like Christmas album, where it's like that. You know when you wake up.
Was it on the song "Putting on the Ritz"? But
yeah, but it was like it was just playing on the idea of Putin coming out with music, and it was like, you know when you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like the TV's on, and it's just like someone going through the songs on an album. You know, it was like that style, but we got. A mission president in Russia reached out and he was like, Putin does not like that. Pull it down. It's going to hurt the work. And so they made us take it down. We did one called, because we were kind of giving Putin a hard time. We did one called.
So Putin would have seen that and told someone that he didn't like it?
I'm imagining maybe some mission president saw it and was just like, listen, the missionaries are already getting beat up here. Like, we can't make it worse for them.
Okay.
But I don't know. But there was one called Juan from Cabo where it's like one of the cast members plays like a Mexican dude and has like a big sombrero. And while I actually brought it up. I was like, we should be careful about how we go about this. We didn't darken skin or anything, but just the fact of dressing up like him was appropriation. And so we ended up pulling that down. And it's always helpful. Some people were like, hey, this is kind of weird. And we were like, they might be onto something. But it was actually like years later. There are homophobic sketches we have. Sketches I wrote that I'm like, oh, this is funny. And then I look back and I'm like, this is misogynistic. Or it's like, this is like homophobic.
Like how so?
In the sense of like, it's like the way it portrays what it means to be gay is in a way that is like mocking or even like the language. I don't know if this one's homophobic, but I was glad I wrote this one. It's called, have you ever seen that show Scared Straight? Where they bring these like delinquent teens into prisons and the prisoners are like, it's hard. You don't know. I did it. I wanted to do a version where they were like gay and scared straight, but I don't think that would have flown. But we ended up making the characters, the main guys. I did these guys that were going on like a service project to read to kittens and they accidentally get on the bus to Scared Straight program where they have to intimidate these like hardened kids, and they're very fruity. It's queer coded.
Interesting.
But and now in my company, because we could never do anything with queer students or queer people at BYU TV because we couldn't acknowledge the existence. But right now in JK Studios, we have like gay characters and bi characters, and it's really cool to be able to like merely represent an actual part of the population. Like people are like indoctrination, and we're like, reality. Like that's like saying we can't talk about black people because what if white kids want to be black now? It's like we exist. It's out there.
Yeah.
So
for those who've never been Mormon, there's this term correlation, which there's an actual department within the Mormon Church that makes sure all the curriculum, all the teachings, all the media conform with doctrine and policy and theology, and frankly, don't embarrass the church. So I'm wondering, were there ever like skits about Joseph Smith or skits about Angel Moroni or the Book of Mormon or modern day Mormon prophets? Did you ever want to do skits satirizing aspects of Mormon culture? And if so, or were there rules that just never let you even get close to that? We always wanted Studio C and like JK Studios to feel like we wanted to feel really inclusive. So like anyone could watch it and have a good time with it. So we actually stayed away from like anything Mormon specific. But there were times every now and then we would do something where it's like, the Mormons maybe get this in a different way. So we never really ran into that issue. And doing sketch comedy at BYU, we were already really familiar with like the lines we wanted to follow. And so it never really was like a shift of like, we got to tone it back. There were times though, because they did not know, like going from Fawns and Porter's quilting and like Scripture Roundtable to a sketch comedy show. They were like, we don't know how to interact with you all, where to put you, what to do. So there was a lot of growing pains for everybody as the station itself was like, okay,
do we need to see every sketch, or how do we regulate? And there were things like, the longer we worked there, we were like, okay, this can change and this can happen. But that was, it's still like, I think a tough thing sometimes to be like, where do we put y'all? Like, what? And in fact, it changed a lot of the direction for the station, where BYU started being like, maybe we should have more secular entertainment that teaches good values, but like stuff that's like, oh, more shows just besides, like reading scriptures with friends, which some people really love, So that was kind of fun. But we never really had any, like, there were no scandals with propriety and stuff. There was one sketch that someone wanted to pull, and I'm surprised it's still up. And drag is so like politicized now. I have been in drag so many times for Jesus, for the BYU TV station. Prophets have seen me in drag, which I love. But one of the parts that's like interesting, there's a sketch we did called Barbs and Rhonda, and it's just me and this other guy in like full drag, trying so hard to be as real to these female characters as we can. And it almost got pulled, but I think because one guy didn't like it, who's one of the higher ups, and we were like, okay, so like, why? And I think the more he thought about it, he was like, I don't have a good reason, and so we like left it up. But yeah, go look up Barbs and Rhonda, and you'll be like, yeah, you would get canceled.
So Julia will for sure include a link to that, and I hope it doesn't get taken down once people know we talked about it.
If they
could happen.
Do it, there's a million sketches up there. Man.
So internet people, download that video now, so that there are copies of it before it gets taken down.
Good old Barbs and Rhonda.
So what led to Studio C being shut down? And did it have anything to do with you coming out and the ticking time bomb of your sexuality?
I don't think so. So I came out, so Studio C, we left in September of 2018, and I came out in December of 2018. The timing was so great for me. And I'm not the only queer person that was into Studio C. One of my best friends, Adam, is also, and it was really fun coming out to him. But like, it was cool that we've had some of these shared experiences. We didn't come out to each other until after Studio C ended, which is wild.
Wait, were there years you were in Studio C where you had graduated but were now full-time? Was it ever full-time employment for people?
Yeah, so I Studio C started in like 2011, and I was like on as a student, but I was working like 8+ hour days, right? Depending on what. So I was like, there were like loopholes for like, so we can pay him less, but also he's just, whatever. I look back now and I'm like, dang it.
Exploited a little bit.
Yeah. But I think there were some restrictions to it being a student at BYU, and they were like, we can't just pay him as a full-time employee without like so much red tape. Anyways.
Right.
So we start that in 2011-12. I graduate college in 2014. And then after that, I get hired as a full-time employee. So from 2014 to 2018, I was full-time working for BYU TV.
Whoa, which means you were an employee of the church for 4 years.
Employee of the church.
Yeah.
Reporting for duty.
Wow.
Yeah, so that
means it was a profitable enough endeavor in terms of money the church brought in that they were willing to, or PR or goodwill, that they were willing to invest significant money in.
That's actually the tricky thing about BYU TV is that it is a nonprofit, and so they're not motivated in the same sense. I do think for what good, I remember hearing people talk about like for what good it's doing for like exposing the church to more people. They were like, we love this because people love the show, and then they find out about the church. Or it's like also it was like giving like space to people who maybe didn't feel very recognized in church, where it's like now the youth are like, this is like a fun show we could watch with our parents, and we like are all enjoying it. But I think it had enough benefits as far as like I think it had more benefits than anything else. That it was like the number one show for quite some time. I don't know if it still is because it's still going, right?
But, it is?
It's gone. So after we left, they brought in a new cast. We brought in a couple cast members. We tried to get them to bring in more because we were like, we're not going to be here forever. And they were like, no, whatever. And then when we left, they were like, how dare you? And we were like, we tried.
Oh, so you left.
Yeah, we left Studio C.
Okay.
So we decided to start our own thing because we wanted to make more content. We wanted to do more than sketches. We wanted to do series.
Commercials.
Like all these other things. And we've made 2 seasons of 2 shows, which is really exciting. We have a movie coming out July 19th. Wow. So it might be already out, but called Go West. And it's like coming out in theaters. Yeah.
Feature length?
Yeah. Feature length.
Oh.
It's Monty Python of the Oregon Trail. It is kind of like this little love letter to our Utah roots a little bit.
And JK Studios produced
JK
it?
Studios, we rewrote it and acted. We hired a production company to produce it, but under the JK umbrella. It's like our movie, and
That's cool.
it's our first company movie, and it's exciting to look back at this group of college kids goofing off for fun to like, we just have a movie coming out. It's wild.
Okay.
Yeah.
So JK Studios, how many people left with you to who left with you to start?
All the original cast members left together.
All of them?
So all 10 of us. We had brought a couple more people in who are, I think some of them are still there now, but like all 10 of us, we just like really love working together, and we really love each other. And we left together. Yeah. So we started JK together.
That must have been really hard for the BYU church employees that were shepherds of the show to just have everyone leave at once.
And we had outlasted a lot of people. Like one of the guys that Jared Shores was one of the original producers of the show, who was one of the forces of getting it, making it happen. He had already been out of BYU TV for a minute. And some people were pretty upset, but like,
Yeah.
we were really, really trying hard to communicate our needs and our expectations. And we were like, I feel like a lot of times it was just like, okay, right. You're going to do your thing. We were like, let's make shows. We want to make sitcoms. We want to make more. And they were like, no, here you just make sketches. So we were like, okay, well, we respect that. And if we want to, if we got mom and dad's house, we got to live by their rules. And if we want to do our own thing, we got to go elsewhere. And it was almost like they didn't believe us, and they were very offended when we did leave. But we were like, we really tried to communicate it.
Well, I didn't know that. I guess I'm sketchy on the history, but as I think about it, that's a real risk to financially leave full-time jobs as artists, as creative artists.
And listen, those like benefits of like BYU TV are good.
Like health insurance.
Yes.
And
They're
401k
so good. Like, yeah. So it's like sometimes you're like, oh, BYU may not be as like paying as much as, some of these other universities, but like benefits out the wazoo. It was really tough in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? It was scary. And even though we've been gone for 5 years, oh my gosh, yeah, feels like longer. It's still scary, but that's just, I think that's part of the risk of owning your own company.
Yeah.
So are you like a employee of JK Studios?
Yeah, I'm part owner in JK Studios.
Whoa.
And I CMO for the company, so I handle the marketing, which is NPR, which is what I studied.
Oh.
Which is cool. And then I'm also one of the writers and actors, so I wear a lot of hats. I really like it.
That's
though.
amazing.
Yeah,
I
so
really-
this movie stuff is like stressing me out, but in like the best way. We just want it to go well.
And so are y'all more about making your own content or about sort of selling your services to people that need creative services?
Making our own content.
Oh, really? And trying to monetize that.
So we've done like ads and we've done other things because those help pay the bills, right? But we are in the business, and it's kind of, we're at a cool company point too, where like everyone has all these other things they do. Like I do a lot of things, and then when we greenlight a project, it's like everyone, if they can, drops whatever, and we're like on this project. Because like when it comes to film and making stuff like this, like movies and sitcoms, it's like the time demand really oscillates. It's like when we're making this movie, it's like every day for like a month is like 12-hour days. We're like filming in the frigid canyon, in the snow. It's exhausting, a huge group of people, but like it just comes and goes, it's like the time demand. So yeah. I own this company with my buddies, which is crazy. And we're making content, and we've been working together for over a decade, and we like each other still. Yeah.
That's super cool. I just didn't know that.
It's really rare, and I feel very, once again, incredibly privileged to have a tight-knit group of friends that I work together, who I trust and who respect and trust me. I think that's really cool.
So the main ways you distribute, is it just through a YouTube channel of your own? Is it through ads?
It depends on the project.
Okay.
So with some of our sitcoms, we've done what do we call that? which it's essentially like, it's like product placement. Essentially, we have a company that sponsors it, and then we like weave their product into it because we're the writers. So we weave their product into it, and so we have like different sponsors on some of those things. They get a lot of exposure. We get the money to make things. With the movie, we have investors, and then it's going to theaters, and so we're going to be selling tickets and stuff, and people are going to come see it.
But the TV show, where can people watch it?
You can actually watch them. One of them is on Angel Studios. We've distributed through Angel. One of them is with on YouTube. You can find a couple of them on YouTube. Most of our stuff is on YouTube.
Are Angel Studios LDS?
I think some people that work there are. They're like based here, but their company
Is that the Sound of Freedom guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not an LDS company though. And so like a lot of their employees aren't, but I think a lot are.
Was that VidAngel people? Mm-hmm. Okay.
It used to be VidAngel and Angel Studios. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've done some stuff with them. We've worked with like Purple. We've worked with
the mattress company.
Yeah, the mattress company, Freshly Picked. And then we've worked with like Harmon Brothers, which is like another distributor out here. And then we've worked with like a bunch of different companies.
Nice.
And it's just been like a good time. And we're just like constantly figuring out things and pivoting and having fun.
That's
and
awesome.
Doing everything. Yeah.
And do you want to shout out to a YouTube channel or Instagram channel?
Yeah, look, if you ever want to see what we're doing, or if you're like a fan of Studio C, look up JK Studios.
Okay.
So especially on YouTube, you'll get a taste of what we're doing. We have our trailers up there for the movie.
Nice.
You can follow us on Instagram, but YouTube is probably one of the best ways.
Okay. How long ago did you guys work for Purple?
Oh, we teamed up with Purple. They were clients. Man, it was like a couple years ago.
Yeah. Okay. It just seemed that a couple years ago, it seemed like all these Utah companies were, all their ads were comedy sketches.
Yeah.
Was it you guys?
There was like, so some more people like wrote on those ads.
Yeah.
Some like with JK, some without. So like Mallory was like one of the faces of the Purple ad for a while.
Yeah. But you guys probably started that kind of trend, or were part of it.
We were probably part of it. I think one of my friends, like someone, I think the Orbrush guys a long time ago started that trend of like comedic, long, entertaining ads.
Yeah.
And we like fit in that world really naturally because we write.
They've been running those at like movie theaters in Utah forever. Like
Isn't that wild?
Funny commercials before movies roll in movie theaters, right?
There's just like innovating. There's a lot of innovation happening out here.
Yeah.
Utah's like at the forefront of a lot of tech stuff too, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Think about, but like it's a good place to, mix it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's transition now to kind of reconstruction, if it's all right.
Let's go.
And I think that'll be a good way to kind of end. But I want to, I guess the first place I want to start is you talked about praying for years to Heavenly Father to make you not gay and to give you a superpower to make you a mutant or a...
I should have never said that one.
No, I love it. I love it. Because I think you do have a superpower. And I think he gave you your wish.
He gave me that one.
And I wonder, and maybe you can correct me, because this is just the impression I'm getting. The impression I'm getting is that you're the only gay ex-Mormon I've ever met that skipped the anger phase.
Oh, man.
Kind of like the burn it all down, destroy it all, and I like, you're laughing. I say it. I can't wait to hear why you're laughing. But I'll make it serious for just a second. Like, when I started learning about the deaths by suicide, kind of like the suicide epidemic, and this was literally 2005, I'm starting to read about the Deseret News publishing, suicide rates are higher than normal across the United States. And a pretty large percentage of them happen to be people with same-sex attraction. Like, I'm reading this stuff in 2005, 2006. I'm starting my PhD in 2009. And by 2010, 11, I'm doing research on LGBTQ Mormons because I'm like fully tuned into the suicide epidemic, not to mention the celibacy disasters and the mixed, the massive prevalence of failed and miserable mixed orientation marriages within Mormonism. Like, I'm seeing decades of carnage, and like year after year after year, it's bubbling within me. The Mormon church is not just hurting a lot of people. You could make the case it's killing a lot of people and wrecking a lot of families. So like, I I couldn't help but get angry at some point. And it was that anger. I tried to channel it in research and in activism, but ultimately I got excommunicated because I couldn't hold it in.
You're like,
right?
You're supposed to like keep quiet or something, or like what are you supposed to do?
And I'm not even gay. Like, you know, so of course, when I meet ex-Mormons and or gay ex-Mormons who didn't do what you did, who they got into marriages that they, they were obedient to the bishop that told them to get married, had kids, marriage exploded catastrophically, or they lived until their 40th or 50th year as celibates and became what they would describe as shells of men or women, right?
Yeah.
Or they took their own lives, or they, had friends that didn't make it. I'm going to say not only is anger a healthy emotion,
it's necessary.
But if there's a place for it, it is within this domain.
Yeah.
Now, having said all that, it almost, what I just did is introduce the idea that you skipped the anger phase.
Yeah.
Now you laughed,
that's so funny.
Maybe I got that wrong.
No. I'm just thinking of there are some very, very angry people out there for good reason, right?
Right.
And I think that's a very necessary part of processing. And I do I guess depending on how you want to phrase the anger phase, I don't feel like I really necessarily had an anger phase. I do get angry. And I do get really passionate. That's why I do work in these spaces, right? It's because the
DEI stuff?
Yeah, it's because I refuse, and I work with I do nonprofit consulting. I've done some stuff with Encircle, and I do a lot of work with Equality Utah. They met me speaking at a Black Lives Matter queer rally in Salt Lake, because I'm involved in these spaces, right? And I say that sometimes because I've had people that were corner me, and they'll be like, they'll be like, you're just not, you don't know what it's like. You're not angry. And I'm like, yes, tell the gay black dude that he doesn't know what it's like to feel different or to be treated like some monster for something he can't control. I don't know. And maybe in some cases, it's really hard to compare experiences. Maybe I haven't. I have. But I think anger is a very, very, very beautiful and necessary emotion. I think about this example one time where me and some buddies were on a plane. We were actually flying to New York for a Studio C show. And we synced our movies up on the back of these chairs to watch a movie together. And my one buddy, he's a big guy, was had a tray table down, was having a good laugh, was hitting the tray table, rocking. We were living our best lives. And then this lady in front of them turns around and she's like, stop hitting my tray table. She just 0 to 60. We didn't even realize that she was there. And as he hit the tray table, he was rocking her chair because it's connected to the chair in front. And I remember thinking on that experience, and I was like, thank goodness she got angry, because she might have just endured that pain the whole dang flight. Luckily, her anger was a motivator that enabled her to make something happen. And while I think we were all whoa, snappy, I remember being she's not wrong, right? And I think about that in your situation too. Hopefully, that anger was a motivator to remove the pain or to find out a solution. And then as we uncover more, we're this is deeper and this is tragic, right? But in my situation, I think that and some of those times when I get angry, I want to do the same, where I'm what can I do? Because I can be mad and I can stew and literally nothing will change. We can be angry and teach seminars to people and maybe nothing will change. But
maybe we'll make them defensive, and make it worse.
But what I do in some of these spaces, and this is what I do with Equality Utah, is we purposefully go to spaces where people are we were at a Republican National Convention thing the other day with a booth talking about trans kids. And that was kind of scary. But the thing is you're never going to get people to change by antagonizing them. You are not going to get people to change by antagonizing them. And it's one thing to talk to someone who is only hurting you, whose only goal is to hurt you, but that is not what we're dealing with when it comes to religion or beliefs, right? You have people who are trying to do what they feel is right. They're following what is their moral compass. And you know what? I'm gonna be straight up. My mom, the church saved her life. It has been so good in her life. If the church did not exist, my mother's life would be in shambles. I am so confident of that. It saved her, and as a result, brought a lot of good to my life, right? But I can also look at that and say, some of the doctrine, some of these teachings has in fact been a catalyst for the suicide endemic, especially amongst queer kids. And I think I can hold those two things and live in this nuance and say, this can do good. This can hurt people, just like us, right? We can you look at someone who's like on death row, and I can guarantee you there are people that love that person and that they love and that they've done good in their life, right? I'm just saying, like, it's just the nuance is so important. And I also think when it comes to making change, this is a very church thing, but you lift where you stand. We need people picketing on the front lines. We need people being ambassadors, having more like strategic conversations. We need it all. We need the Rosa Parks, the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's. We need these people that satisfy different roles. And so that's another thing, is when people are like, you're not doing it like I want you to do it. It's like, well, you do your thing. Let me do my thing. You do your thing. If I'm hurting someone, let me know. I feel like I hear people say that against Ben Shalati and Charlie Bird. And honestly, I think anger sometimes is like electricity. It takes the pathway of least resistance. It's like, if you're mad at the church, don't come for someone who's trying to do good in it. Like, maybe you're justified at being bothered, but if and it just like depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to get them to adapt, or are you just trying to express your hurt? Both are valid, but both you will go about in different ways and have different outcomes. So if I go to these DEI spaces and I'm talking to, we did a training with the police department in Utah, state troopers, right? Do a lot of work there to help increase the relationship with people of color. And if I showed up and I was like, look here, you pigs, immediate walls, nothing's changing. I might have done something good for myself in expressing and processing anger and hurt, but like literally not going to change the situation.
Make it worse.
Yeah, to make it worse. And I think these situations depend. I'm not saying this is how you got to navigate any situation, but we go in these spaces and we try to really, really, really hold the nuance of humanity of these people, of like, these are people who are loved, love others, who are really trying their best. For the most part, I don't think someone is in there just to wreak havoc. And if they are, I'm not going to help them anyways, right? Like, that's out of my purview. But it really, 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 really comes back to like effectiveness for me. And I remember sitting with my buddy and being like, how do we make positive change? And yes, I've been angry. And I've had good friends sit through incredible tirades, me yelling all sorts of words, right? But I also really want to be effective, I don't know. It sounds really preachy. And at the end of the day, I am not here to judge how other people are doing things. I'm here to like analyze how I'm going about it. I will, though, say, if you want to make a change, look at your methods. Like, look at the results. If your goal is to make positive change, maybe leading with anger may not always do it, but maybe it will. I don't know. Depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah. Be strategic about it. I don't know.
Makes sense.
It's kind of hard sometimes, because sometimes I do have moments where I have to like tap out and be like, I'm gonna go be mad. I'm gonna go rage, and I'm not gonna do that here because it ain't gonna help anybody, right? But yeah, I don't know.
That's powerful. Thank you. Okay, next part around Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Sometimes I almost always ask questions about sexuality, and every once in a while I get commenters who are like, "John, you're obsessed with sex." I'm just gonna
join the party. I love it too.
I'm just gonna respond to them directly and just say, "There's a difference between being sex positive and being obsessed, or being creepy and or obsessed with sex, right?"
Yeah, look, I didn't even think about the creepy aspect.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, but I always want to operate in the spirit of being educational and sex positive. And sex is part of the human
We
experience.
have to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a part of health.
Yeah.
It's one of the rings of health.
Yeah.
Sexual health is important. It's part of your maturity and how you progress. Like sometimes when people have concerns like that, I'm like, man, you might need to do a little soul searching on why that bothers you.
Yeah.
It might be something you need to figure out here.
Totally. So the first question I have is if just like with women who are like, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, Mormon women, and then all of a sudden they get married and it's like, go have sex. The decades of conditioning can really take sometimes years, if not decades, to reprogram. So you're taught from the time you're, born that being gay is wrong.
Right.
And that not only is premarital sex wrong, not in a legal marriage is wrong, but then gay sex in Mormonism has been compared to bestiality or pedophilia.
It's worse than murder.
Right. Worse than murder, literally. I mean, he's not exaggerating. So like, as we talk about Reconstruction, how did have you processed that to kind of reprogram yourself?
That's a really good question.
Or has that even been an issue for you? Or was it just like, oh, I'm good now?
No, I feel like, and actually I feel like there's a lot of, like talking about my process of like the chrysalis, like going in that cocoon, where I feel like that was actually really, really nice because what I worked through first was like shame and my beliefs. So I wasn't in this situation where I did something and then had to be like, holy crap, I hate myself. This is the worst. It was like I figured out I figured out for the most part, like where my parameters were. And then I had experiences. And so I think that helped a lot with like how I framed some of these things. And also I moved at my own pace. I moved I don't even care if it's slow or fast. I just moved at a pace that was comfortable for me. So whether it was like intimacy with another man, I remember the first time I kissed a guy, and it was like, it took time to get there. And I was like, that's okay. One guy went in at a date once and I swerved. I swooped. I didn't need responsibility. You got to look out for you. I wasn't ready. But I remember the first time I kissed a guy, it was like the most magical experience. I was like, after that, I was like, I get what straight people I have been writing songs about for decades. I was like, since the dawn of man, I was like, I get it. It was just like eye-opening and wonderful. And I think part of that came from me taking things at my own pace. And if someone didn't respect my pace, that was like a huge red flag. If someone's like, you're not moving fast enough, I'd be like, next, we're not compatible anyways, if that's your vibe. If you can't, you know what I mean? It's like, take that unhealthiness elsewhere. But I just moved at my own pace. And I think that's okay. And I felt really healthy for me. I can't imagine what situation that wouldn't work. But to answer your question, if I didn't feel good, I didn't do it, is essentially how I put it. So the whole like, I'm going to feel shame, I just wouldn't do that. And then if I did do something that I felt bad about it, I just wouldn't do it again. You know what I mean? Or at least I would be like, oh, that was a data point. Like, let's adjust, right? But for me and everything, I don't think I experienced too much of that. And I think part of that was figuring it out before and then taking my time. And yeah.
Gerardo, I don't know if you know this, but so I did my PhD dissertation on the LGBTQ Mormon experience.
Are you like, he's so unhealthy?
No, I'm loving this. But one of the findings we never published was that like 40%, like 1,612 people took, there's 1,622 people took the survey. Like 45% reported some sort of spiritual affirmation of their LGBTQ identities while they were still Mormon. Like I was driving to, off myself, and then I prayed one last time and God told me, I love you just as you are. Like 45% of the narratives expressed or endorsed some sort of spiritual confirmation that God loved them for who they were. I'm wondering, and by the way, if there's ever a researcher out there who wants to sort of like take on that data set, analyze it, and write about it, the data's there. Like 44% of 1,600. That's a really big N, and I'm sure some really interesting papers and or multiple dissertations could come out of that data. So that's an open invitation if there's a researcher out there who wants to pursue it. But having said that, I wonder if your spiritual confirmation affirming your sexuality that you experienced made your transition into healthy sexuality easier.
I think so all the time. Like, for sure. I'm glad you said that because I didn't think about that, but 100%. It just gave me in so many aspects of my life, like an unshakable confidence in the direction I moved. So there wasn't like second guessing, right? It wasn't like anyone could say anything and I'd be like, oh, maybe you're right. I was just like, I'm good. And I feel like, honestly, my relationship, like how I think of God now is so different than how I thought of God. Back when I was like heavily, what'd you say?
Let's go there. God and Jesus.
Yeah. So like, I used to think of God as like, I feel like I had a pretty, like a positive aspect, but I kind of looked at God as like this, like removed old dude in a cloud, kind of thing, watching me try to walk this trail that he had paved for me. And when I go off the trail, he's like, oh, let's get back a little bit. Let's get back a little bit. Jesus has got you covered. No, man, let get you back on the trail. And now how I view like deity and the divine is like this, honestly, this thing with me, this sense in me, as I pave my own trail. That's just along with me to help me learn these lessons. So I feel like I have this confidence as I navigate my own life versus like someone like a ref watching me like, oh, get back on the lines. We got to blow the whistle, give you a little card, get back on the lines. Now it's like, God is like the divine, the universe, however you want to think of it, like wants us to succeed, is with me on this like new trail I'm paving, and I'm just having new fun experiences and getting data points and adjusting and trying to be better every day. Like it's shifted so much. And a lot of that is like, there's no more of that idea, at least in my experience, of like shame where it's like, you did wrong. It's like, oh no, we got a data point. Instead of like, you made a mistake, it's like, we got a data point. Let's adjust accordingly. You know what I mean?
Learning instead of sin, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, forget sin. It's like the point is to have experiences and learn and grow and get better. So part of that is like, have a new experience, take a risk, push yourself, and analyze and make adjustments is like kind of how I view it now.
How literal is it that there's a anthropomorphic being in the sky, that there's an actual heaven, and that when we die, we get resurrected and there's an afterlife?
I do feel like there's so, like, honestly, and this is never like a conscious choice. I just like every now and then when I check in, I'm like, how do I feel? What resonates with me? I don't know if there's like an actual being out there. I don't know if there's like a physical old dude with a really, really manicured beard. Oh, fingers crossed. Like, I don't know, right? And I really don't care. But I do feel like there is something bigger than me that wants me to succeed, that cares for me. And whether that's real or not, gives me confidence and helps me navigate in a way. It motivates me to be a better person. I'm like, why not? And so whether it's like a person or the universe or the earth and nature, whatever it is, wants us to succeed, and I'm cool with that. And I like that a lot. I just feel like there's something bigger than me, and I really love that belief. Something that like ties us all together, encourages us all to, like, we're all in the same family, and we should be supporting each other more. Like, I like that a lot. I like some of those beliefs. And I definitely think some of those have been adapted from my LDS upbringing, like the concept that we're all siblings. And then we have this responsibility to look out for each other. Even the concept of the atonement, I think, is super beautiful, that someone sacrificed themselves so that we could literally make mistakes, learn, and grow. I think that's beautiful. And I think it figures into the way that I'm like, yeah, this life is meant to be lived, not to be like perfect, but to be lived, to be messy, and to like change and grow. Like, I really like that,
How do you identify in terms of like Christianity? How close do you feel towards, Jesus as an actual person who lived, and or as a Christian?
And maybe I developed this back in my day, but I feel like my mindset is it's like the Noah's Ark thing. I'm like, it doesn't matter. There's so many things that I'm just like, like, if you believe it, Like, power to you. Like, I almost have this thing sometimes where people will be like, I just don't see the value in being skeptical. So if someone's like, God, appeared to me and motivated me to serve a bunch of orphans, I'm like, I have no reason to disbelieve that. Like, you're doing good. You're not hurting people.
Or to pick that apart.
Yeah. I just like have no desire at all. I'm like, hey, if that's important to you, that's important to me because I care about you, So I just like, honestly, I don't ever sit and like pull things apart unless it's like my own beliefs, right? But I'm like, so when I think about, I like believe in God. Maybe my idea of God is different than what it used to be, but I'm just like, like it works for me. I don't really worry too much about it. Maybe one day I will, and then I'll adjust accordingly, and that sounds exciting actually. Being like, oh, let's think through that, let's process this. But right now I'm like, I consider myself Christian, but I also think there's like all these other elements of like Taoism that I love, and like just like
Buddhism,
and like all these different religions where I'm like, this is all so beautiful, and it's also helpful to becoming a better person. Like, why not? Like I'm not like walking around like, oh, Buddhism is fake or whatever. I'm just like, let it all be real, let it all be fake. It doesn't change my life. It doesn't change how I navigate me. So I don't know.
Do you think you'll stay in Utah?
Oh, we'll see. It depends on what happens with work and life, and if there's any single guys out there.
Okay, so you are looking for someone. You're looking for people to date. Is that what you're saying?
I'm like busy these days, but like, yeah. Okay. You just never know. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm open to dating. I'm a very, like, that's like the way I navigate my life. I'm very open. So like I go on dates, no expectations. Sometimes it pans out. Sometimes we become good friends. Sometimes we are mortal enemies. And what a beautiful thing to have this slew of experiences. There haven't been any mortal enemies yet, but I even feel like it's just like life is meant to be lived. And it's like, I guess that's Taoism, where it's like, you just be like the water, just like flow with it. You know what I mean? And so come what may.
So that's Stacey Harkey, Staceyharkey on Instagram. Slide into his DMs if you're interested.
They're going to be like, we know too much about him. There's no way.
Have you found a church home, or do you even look for that?
That's actually interesting you ask. I do think one of the toughest things about not going to like a LDS chapel is the community. That's something that I missed a lot. But what happened was I started working out a lot, Studio C. So I started working out because they pulled me aside at Studio C and they were like, hey, you're too fat. You need to lose weight. And I was like, I'm on a comedy show. Anyways, it wasn't like a CW, like Arrow, like everyone needs to be hot, but whatever. That's a whole nother story about reconstructing how I view my body and myself and self-worth. But it's a beautiful one. It's proper. Anyways, the gym has become like a new home for me. It's a place where I interact. I teach fitness classes. I'm a personal trainer.
Where do you teach?
I teach at Provo Rec Center and the Springville Rec Center. I used to teach at BYU actually, back in my gay days, and early on, and it was just great. But it was too hard to park there, and so I was like, no more. It's like a hobby job. So I might teach other places, but it's just the concept of like, there's a place where I go where I interact with people who I wouldn't normally interact with, different ages, different walks of life. A lot of moms, love me some moms, but like teens and stuff, like all these different people I'm interacting with, and they're in my community, and I feel like I'm very connected, and I feel like I'm doing good, for people, and so it's like I feel like one day I was like, oh my gosh, that's like replaced what I felt like I was missing from religion. But I'm also very involved. I get that from my dad. I'm involved with queer nonprofits. That's a part of my community. I'm involved with like Stonewall Sports, which is like queer like sports leagues. It's a huge part of my community. I like work life. Those people are like some of my best friends. Like, so I just stay really involved. I have a pretty good sense of community.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a compliment and a question to end, but before I do,
put
Gerardo,
an insult in there.
Any final questions or anything?
No.
Okay.
I think this has been great.
Yeah. Enjoyed it?
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Well,
I told Gerardo to roast me, and I'm like, maybe he did, and I missed it.
No, I mean, it's been great. I've learned a lot, lots of good perspectives for sure.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, here's the compliment. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
Once you start trying to learn about diversity, you hear this term intersectionality, and you think, okay, that's a checkbox. You need to, try and include as many different gender diversity and sexual diversity and racial diversity and age diversity, all the diversities, try and integrate them when you can, like a bingo, you know what I mean? As if it's just an obligation. And for me, one of the things I've taken away so much from today is how your different elements of diversity in your life have helped to create and to shape who you are. And who you are, as a theme that I've kind of tried to touch on, your level of flexibility, of compassion, of the ability to hold paradox and nuance, and kind of your resilience and optimism. How could that not come from all the different ways that kind of make up who you are? And for me, those exemplary personality traits are really inspiring, and it's inspiring that they clearly come from all the things that make up you and from your history.
Very flat. That's a lot of, boy, like, dang. Get the tissues out. I have thought before about the aspect of intersectionality, these like overlapping identities that give me unique perspective. And I actually feel like for example, being black helps so much with being gay. Because when I came out and people were like, we don't like you for something you can't control, I was like, been there, done that, get in line. Like, I've been black my whole life, and guess what? I can't hide that one. And I think my relationship with religion out here has been really helpful on those fronts of being gay and being black, where it's like, I have had to develop a sense of self-worth and self-confidence that is not externally influenced. It does not come from other people's perspective of me, because I would have crumbled a long time ago. And maybe I did it at a certain point, and that's why I hit that lowest low and I had to like find something else. And I still think that's like a game that I'm working on too. But that stuff is really helpful when it comes to being authentic. Finding out where your value and worth comes from is so helpful for giving you the confidence to like navigate spaces where people are going to be haters.
Yeah.
You know?
That's beautiful. Well, cool. Well, then let's end on this, because I know you got to roll. And let's just say there's someone out there who's questioning their faith, or who's a racial minority and experiencing difficulty there, or they're a sexual minority, or they're just a human they're a woman, or they're a trans person, or they're just struggling. And they're just looking for a reason to believe that things can get better, and they're looking for a reason to hope. Break that fourth wall, and if you don't mind, give them a final message.
I honestly feel like there's a million things, right? A million things. But for me, and in my life and in my perspective, working to be authentic goes so far. And I break that down into taking the time to really learn who you are. And for me, that was like facing that I was gay. That was scary. That was terrifying. And authenticity isn't easy because there's risk, right? You have the chance of losing community and things that you've worked for. But taking that time to learn who you are and then living in a way that reflects that, the external expression of that, is going to give you so much as far as your ability to give to others, as far as the belief and confidence you have in yourself. I think that's going to do so much, whether it's your sexuality, your identity, your belief system, even like the shows you watch and the people you hang out with. I'm like, I think this goes so far. Beautiful. All right. Well, again, the Instagram is Stacey Harkey, STACEYHARKEY. The company is JK Studios. JK Studios. JK Studios.com. Yeah. We have a website too, but JK Studios on YouTube. And any other things you want to plug? Stacey does writing, acting, film, TV, movies. He also does personal training. He does diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Yeah.
training?
DEI stuff. It's honestly like I feel like when I tell people all the things I do, it sounds like I don't have a job. But I stay very busy, and I love it all. I feel I feel blessed and fortunate. I feel just really privileged, which means I got to do more to make it better for other people. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Well, Stacey Harkey, thanks for coming on Mormon Stories. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Gerardo, as always, thanks for keeping this place going in all the ways that people see and don't see, but also thanks for being co-host today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, John.
All right.
Thanks, Stacey.
And thanks to everyone who joined us today on Mormon Stories. Stay in touch. Thanks for your support and check us out. Please subscribe on YouTube and all TikTok and Instagram. Subscribe everywhere. Donate and support us if you can. But most importantly, support Stacey and then JK Productions and their good work. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We'll see you again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.